wellness
money, but
luncheon?
you know what? We're doing so many good things.
All the power lines.
$2 a pound?
You know, and I said,
Yeah,
you know,
well,
You need a ranger there for
limited
it.
number of people that you have.
it started.
You gotta be careful with that. I talked to Ross, that's his neighbor.
Oh, Fred Tank?
Fred Tank.
And it wasn't even a
And,
Grand Canyon.
and then, you know, and then like
That's the
Twin
kid did
Lakes.
his job.
Yeah.
He got people there wanting to break his animal.
Yep.
That's what that.
Contract
that's
that
the
out,
name of the game.
get a liquor license.
And I think there's a few things, you know, so anyway, I cut it 50,000.
One
and said,
975,
You guys
two
figure it out.
950. Out of 200 and something.
You're gonna put that back down right
That
when you
kid's got a good
It's-
college program.
It's one thing.
It's 7
one thing
o'clock.
when you have an animal that comes in that's a couple of pounds underweight, you know, but those kids know what the requirements are for the
Larry.
program when they get started. But more importantly, with those pigs that were there, 156 pounds shouldn't even been there.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'll call the regularly scheduled meeting of Ways and Means for Wednesday, August 17th at 7 p.m. I'd like to say good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow members of the commission. If you have cell phones, switch them off or turn them to silent mode, please, or we'll have to throw you out.
Promise?
People at viewing audience, please turn up your audio so you can hear us. There might be an argument, something of interest. And next item would be the Pledge to Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you call the roll call, please, Linda?
Commissioner Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Max Bauer. Commissioner Thomas.
Yep.
Commissioner Richardson.
Here.
Commissioner Lemko.
Here.
Commissioner Henschel.
Here.
Commissioner Inman.
Here.
Commissioner Gilman.
Here.
Chairman Fleece.
Present. Okay, next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of July 20th, 2011. Has everybody had a chance to review them, and is there any discussion? If not, I'm open for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the July 20th, 2011 minutes of the Ways and Means Committee. Support.
Is there any, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? If not, all signify aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same. Motion passes. Next item is public comment. Would you read the rules of the public comment?
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners, which is required to be open to the public under the provisions of the Michigan Open Meetings Act as amended. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. Chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak.
Thank you. Is there anybody desiring to speak at the first public comment? If so, just come up to the table, state your name and address, please. We have a silent audience tonight, so we'll go on to approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I had sent the Board of Commissioners a memo dated August 15th suggesting that we had 2 items under item B, under finance, that would be item 3 and 4, and that would be the revised special budget meeting schedule that we have printed on your desk, and also a discussion among the commission as to how they would like to view and the format of the special budget meetings that are scheduled in September. If we could add those items, that would be helpful to me and administration.
Ross?
I move for approval of the agenda with the changes noted by Commissioner Inman.
Support.
Been moved and supported to approve approve the agenda as presented with the additions under finance of items 3 and 4. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion passes. Next item is special orders of business. Elaine Wood is going to give us the Michigan Works Annual Report.
Evening, Elaine.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for giving us some time on your agenda tonight.
Elaine,
Yes,
if the three of you could please state your names.
okay,
And then move your microphones as you talk so they can pick it up.
Okay.
And who you're with.
Elaine like
all
this.
right.
No.
Just swing that
I know
on
you
back
can't,
and
you
forth.
shouldn't get too close or you get, right? Funny sounds. Okay. I'm Elaine Wood. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments.
And I'm Ken Osborne, and I'm one of the owners of Boride Engineered Abrasives, a manufacturing company in Traverse City.
Hi, I'm Sue Peters. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources at Munson Medical Center, and I'm a Workforce Development Board member.
Both Ken and Sue are Workforce Board members who oversee the Michigan Works portion of the Council of Governments, which is by far our largest program. And so we're here tonight to give you the annual report for Northwest Michigan Works, not for the entire Council of Governments. We've discovered over time that that's just too much and too complicated, so we break it down by programs. So tonight you're just getting the annual report on Michigan Works. And it's really 1 year old at this point, but that's how long it takes for us to get all the data back from the state and federal government and put it all together. But it does give you a very good feeling for what happened last year and really what's happening currently in Michigan Works. So I'm going to turn it over to Sue and Ken, and they can give you the report, and then we'll be happy to answer questions.
Great. Has anybody had a chance to look at this yet? Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is just point out a couple things in the report. If you go to the second page in the report, and actually on each of the pages, you'll see some quotes at the bottom of the page. And I think that where the annual report really emphasizes the numbers and the stats, the quotes at the bottom really talk and maybe speak to how employers and people who go through the program are impacted by the work that's done. And so I think it kind of gives a flavor for the impact that this organization has. On page 2, the only comments that I have on that is that you can see the total Workforce Development Board members. There are 31 seats here, and 2/3 of them are filled by the private sector representatives. On page 3, a couple things to point out. One, if you take a look at the mission of the organization, it's very much related to the overall economic health and prosperity of this region. And so I think that that is a worthy cause for this organization. If you look at the objectives and what the organization is trying to achieve, you'll see that the employer is the primary customer. We're really trying to address their workforce needs. In terms of funding that comes through this program, there's roughly about $14 million, and you can see that almost all of that is through federal dollars that passes through the state. And then in addition to that, there's another couple $100,000 that is received through the state funding for adult education. And then Ken is going to talk about 4, 5, and 6.
Okay, thank you. Pages 4, 5, and 6 are really, this is what the Workforce Development Board does, and the Michigan Works part of it does. But the workforce, the couple of interesting points, the Workforce Investment Act, this group has served 3.7 of the total individuals in the area, or statewide actually, that are covered under this act, with only 2.5% of the funding. So they've done a very good job managing the money and putting it to good use back to creating opportunities for people to become educated and go on to work. You can see on page 4 that there are a lot of different programs that are done. There's incumbent worker training, on-the-job training, the Beaver Lighthouse and Island Lighthouse Alternative School. There's a summer youth work experience, and the Trade Act for dislocated workers. One of the things that I found pretty enlightening was, it was probably about 2 or 3 board meetings ago, we had a former employee of the Tower Automotive, and this individual had grown up thinking he wasn't a bright person. He had trouble reading, really struggled going through school, dropped out of high school, and never really learned to read and write. And he got laid off from Tower, And he entered into this program, and he discovered that he had a reading disability. And through the adult education training, or through the Trade Act for Dislocated Workers, he was able to correct his reading disability, go on and get his GED diploma, and now he's enrolled in NMC in an IT program, and he's on the dean's list there. So this is the kind of work that this group does, and how effective it's been over the past several years in trying to help displaced workers. And this is really more of the norm. You know, a lot of times you hear about people who are using unemployment as a way of milking the system, but really most of the people that come through truly are trying to find work and trying to improve their skills so that they can be placed back in the workforce. So I just think that was a testimonial. I told Elaine, really what you ought to do is show that video to this group, because it really did a good job showing what the program was about.
The only thing that I'd like to add to this is that if you look at the number of people served based on the percent of funding, it really is an example of how the dollars are very efficiently used in this organization.
One other point on page 6, and we talk about the return on investment, and that's always very important from a business standpoint. And one of the things that this board has been able to do is on the Workforce Investment Act, the recovery for every dollar spent in the adult education program, $1.33 is returned in the first year. And it's also as high as $4.13 for the JET, the Jobs, Education, and Training Program. So it's money that really comes back into the community, and it's showing a real good return on the investment over the course of the year.
And then lastly, on page 7, this really shows how this Workforce Development Board stacks up with statewide performance measures. And you can see that this chart shows that we performed really quite well. I think that I think that if you look at the Northwest Michigan region compared to the statewide, you can see that we exceeded it on almost all counts. About 92% of those we exceeded the statewide standards. And again, I think that if you think about in terms of effectiveness of how the organization performs, this is one measure of that. So with that, I think that we'll open it up to any questions that this group might have.
Herb?
Yeah, you know, my biggest thing has been the Summer Youth Work Experience Program, because I think it affects so many of our people and the projects they do. Could you talk a little bit more about what they're doing and what they did for this summer and what kind of projects they worked on?
Sure. This summer, we were back to a small program. We had 2 years of quite a large summer youth program because of the Recovery Act, but that was an anomaly. Normally, we have the numbers that you see in here. So I think it's about 400 youth, and they do all kinds of, I guess what we could call public service jobs. They work in libraries, they paint township buildings, they, work at nonprofits. And they are monitored for their growth in terms of their employability. So they're not just placed there and then left alone. They have tremendous supervision, and their work is evaluated very strictly by the staff. So it's a training.
Any trails done this year?
Probably, but I don't know off the top of my head. Trails are probably one of the most common work sites that we have, working with the DNR, state parks, that kind of thing.
I know they put about 1,000 feet of boardwalk in the Crossings Trail in past years, and I just didn't know if they'd done other work at the Commons or someplace else, and what they've done, so.
Jason?
On your pie chart, you have the finances laid out here. You've got $2.5 million coming from the Recovery Act. Is that going to still be there next year?
No, that's gone.
Okay, so that's gone. So you're going to be theoretically that much less funded.
And more, actually,
And more.
because we have had over the past 2 years about a 30% funding cut, not counting the Recovery Act money going away. So it's a much smaller program for this coming year than it was last year.
Do you have any projections as far as additional people being served? Are you looking at increases or decreases, or about the same number?
We're hoping to be able to keep it about the same, even with a 30% reduction in funding. We're making all kinds of changes in how we operate. We're doing more things with technology. The other thing that we're doing is trying to make travel, make it easier for people to reach us. So if you look on the cover, you'll see that in the 5 counties, 5 out of 10 where we don't have an actual Michigan Works Center, we're now establishing what we call access points, and they're kind of like a kiosk workstation kind of place. And those won't be staffed right now, but they will be places where people can do about 50-60% of what they could do at a Michigan Works Center on their own. So it's a place where people can get access and get started.
Like a networked location?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sonny?
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but I can't do it anyway. You know, I think Michigan Works runs some fairly good programs, but I think the misconception that we all have is that there's a lot of qualified workers out there that don't have a job. And as an employer, I can tell you, I cannot find qualified help, period. And I can give you 20 businesses in this community that are in the same way. And it doesn't matter whether I'm looking for skilled welders or if I'm looking at some laborer that's going to show up 3 days in a row would be a nice thing.
Right.
You know, the workforce that we're hiring in today's market, I can't remember how long it's been since I've had all of my employees to work every day for a week. You know, and I employ 18 people.
Right.
But they just don't show up.
Yeah. We hear that same kind of feedback from many, many employers, and there's really 2 sets of problems, and we try to deal with these every day. One is the skills gap, and welding happens to be one of the areas where we haven't trained enough people as a society, and all of a sudden welding jobs are there, and people don't have the skills for those jobs. So we will be doing some welding training this year, but we only really have a couple places in our whole 10 counties where we can get that kind of training for people. One is the TBA Career Tech Center, fortunately. The other issue is the work ethic kinds of things. And we have every day in Michigan Works a dozen workshops, training programs, et cetera, for people to learn what employers expect, what you need from them, what kinds of behaviors are appropriate, and yet we can't force anyone to go through those programs. The only thing we can do is if we put somebody in training, or if we put them like in an on-the-job training contract at your company, then we can require that they go through those activities first and we can screen them. But we're not mandatory for anyone, even though we serve probably about 30,000 individuals a year in our 10-county region. That's a lot of people, but that's sort of scratching the surface of the need.
Jason?
Do you have any way of weighting, I mean, as in weight, the motivation of some? I mean, for some people, it's almost not even worth the time because they're not going to do what you say, you know, they need to do to find gainful employment.
Yeah.
Do you ever have to just say, look, I'm sorry I can't help you because you're not willing to do what it takes?
Yes, in fact, we say that every day because we are not an entitlement program.
Right.
So we're not forced to serve anybody who comes in the door. So our business liaisons who work directly with companies are screening all the time, screening out people that they don't feel are ready to come to you, and screening in people that they want to refer to you that they feel a little more confident that have the kinds of work behaviors that you're looking for. So we can do that. And we frequently do tell people, you're not putting in the effort that it's going to take. A lot of our services are free to are open to anyone, and they're the lowest cost services. And so anybody can come in a Michigan Works Center and get a certain level of help. But then beyond that, it really narrows down. And anybody that we actually spend any direct dollars on, we try to make sure that they're going through those kinds of activities so that by the time they come to you, they've been screened and prepared.
Are there any other questions? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate the report.
Mr. Chairman, on the next item, I did get a call from Mr. McGuire, and he had a personal issue, I believe, with his mother, which caused him to leave Lansing later than he anticipated. He is on his way up. He did indicate that he thought he would be here between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, so if we can fit him in sometime during the agenda, it would be appreciated, but he is on his way up.
Okay, thank you. With the board's permission, when Tim does arrive, however it works out, I'll just work him into the agenda if that's fine. Okay, next item would be the 2010 audit presentation.
I'll introduce our auditor, Steve Peacock with Raymond. He will walk you through in a very brief manner our 2010 audit report. We did email this to you last week. It's a large document, over 200 pages. It's actually a comprehensive annual financial report. I did email additional information to you this afternoon. I put a copy on everyone's desk except for Commissioner Henschel. And Steve will pretty much walk you through those 10 or 12 pages and then open it up for questions. Our 2010 audit is also on the county website. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Peacock.
Thank you, Mr. Bott. Good evening. My name is Steve Peacock. I am the audit principal here in the Traverse City office of Raymond. We're very pleased to present to you the annual financial statements for the county as of December 31st, 2010. As Dean mentioned, the comprehensive annual financial statement is very lengthy. It's over 200 pages in length, and I'm more than happy to pick any page out that you'd like to discuss, but the information that he provided to you in an email this afternoon, I believe, is probably the most relevant for those on the Board of Commissioners. So I'll start with that, and again, if there's any questions that drill down into the meat of the document, by all means, either stop me during the presentation or save your questions until the end and we can go from there. On page 2 of the financial statements, which is the first page of this document the Dean had sent to you, it's the independent auditor's report, which is what we were engaged to provide to the county. And I don't read this to anybody in its entirety, but I do talk about what the paragraphs mean specifically to you as the county commissioners. The first paragraph discusses the statements that we were engaged to audit. These were the December 31st, 2010 financial statements of Grand Traverse County. Second paragraph discusses specifically the accounting standards and the auditing standards we're required to employ during the performance of our audit. This being a governmental unit and subject to OMB Circular A-133, we were required to use governmental auditing standards which are defined in that second paragraph. The third paragraph is our opinion, and I will read that to you. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, the aggregate discretely presented component units, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the county as of December 31st, 2010, and the respective changes in financial position and, where applicable, cash flows, and the respective budgetary comparisons for the general fund and each major special revenue fund thereof for the year then ended in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the U.S. That is a clean or an unqualified opinion, and that's the highest level of assurance we can place on financial statements. So that's good news for the county. On page 3, or the second page of the document you received, top paragraph, that directs the reader to single audit sections 2 through 5, which contain 2 other additional opinions with respect to compliance with OMB Circular A-133, which is commonly referred to as a single audit. It's an additional layer of audit procedures that's placed over federal expenditures. We'll talk about those opinions in just a moment. The next paragraph discusses the auditor's responsibility with the management's discussion and analysis and the schedules of funding progress that appear on page 4 through 13 and pages 76 through 78. Those are not required parts of the basic financial statements. However, those are required supplementary information required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. I'll direct your attention to the second of the last paragraph, or sentence in that paragraph. We have applied certain limited procedures which consisted principally of inquiries of management regarding the methods of measurement and presentation of the required supplementary information. However, we did not audit that information and express no opinion thereon. The last paragraph of our report discusses our responsibility with respect to the lengthy schedules that appear after the footnotes of the document. Those are very common in county and city municipal units of government to have very lengthy supplemental schedules. I'll direct your attention to the second to the last sentence in that paragraph. The combining and individual fund financial statements and the schedule of expenditures of federal awards have been subjected to the auditing procedures applied in the audit of the basic financial statements, and in our opinion are fairly stated in all material respects in relation to the basic financial statements taken as a whole. So our opinion does cover that supplemental material as well as the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. The introductory and statistical sections have not been subjected to the auditing procedures applied in the audit of the basic financial statements, and accordingly, we do not express an opinion on those. Those two elements of this comprehensive annual financial report are what differentiate a normal financial statement from a CAFR, or a comprehensive annual financial report. The introductory and statistical sections are further detail that Mr. Bott uses to apply for the Certificate of Excellence in Governmental Financial Reporting. So that's in addition to the financial statements. Just a couple notes. As mentioned in that top paragraph, there are two additional opinions that appear in the document. They are single audit. They're in section SA1, which is in the very back of the document. As mentioned, the county is required to have a single audit because it expended more than $500,000 of federal expenditures. As such, we're required to issue two opinions. One is the opinion on internal controls over financial reporting, and the second opinion is on compliance with certain grant provisions under Circular A-133. We scope out certain programs and we test them for additional compliance with the Federal Register and those compliance supplements that are issued by the federal government. And single audit, page 10, has the results of the testing of that particular audit. I will direct your attention that there were 7 issues that came out of the procedures for the single audit, all of which has been resolved to the auditor's satisfaction on a go-forward basis with a corrective plan by management. So, any questions on the financial statements or the opinion that contained thereon?
Jason?
Those corrections, were they anything that we would be interested in as a board?
There was nothing material. There was nothing of major significance. Immaterial instances of non-compliance, again, resolved completely to the satisfaction of the audit firm. They are further delineated in the single audit section, so if there's ever any question, by all means, you could contact me. The other document that you have in your package that came from Mr. Bott is a letter that's on our letterhead. This is a required correspondence that the auditor is to have with those charged with governance, or in this case, the county commission. And I'm just going to run you through this kind of briefly. It's a lengthy document. This is probably very similar to what you've seen in the past, and there's really not any epiphanies in this letter as well. Under the first bold caption, our responsibility under auditing standards generally accepted in the United States. Briefly, what that tells you is that we issued an engagement letter on March the 15th, 2011, telling the commission that we were going to do certain events during our audit. I'm here to report to you that we have concluded audit procedures, and with the acceptance of the financial statement today, any audit procedures related to 2010 have concluded. Okay? In addition, there is a discussion in there that, yes, I'm sorry.
When was the last time your firm was audited? You go through an audit too, were you
Yep.
not?
The peer review.
Does that specify a peer review?
Yep.
Does that specify in here?
It does not specify in this document, but our engagement letter that was sent to the county prior to engaging us had a copy of our peer review and our peer review report and our letter of comment that was attached to our peer review. So the county does have that on file with the engagement letter. It was also part of our audit proposal that was issued 6-7 months ago. So, matter of fact, tomorrow afternoon is our peer review exit conference for the peer review going on right now. So,
Oh, good.
Yep. Our firm has been in compliance with that ever since that standard came out, which was back in 1979. So we've been compliant with that particular provision since 1979. In addition, in that first discussion point, it also reminds the board that the county was subject to a single audit. Again, we've talked about that. That's the additional audit procedures over federal expenditures. Under planned scope and timing of the audit, the next bold caption on page 2 of the letter, we had a planning meeting internally on April the 12th of 2011 that laid out certain benchmarks for us to achieve in completing the audit. And again, I'm here to report to you that those benchmarks have been met and the report has been issued. Under significant results from the audit, under qualitative aspects of accounting practices, I'll direct your attention to the third sentence in the first paragraph. The significant accounting policies used by the county are described in footnote number 1 to the financial statements. There were no new accounting policies that were adopted, and the application of existing policies were not changed during the year. We noted no transactions entered into by the county during the year for which there is a lack of authoritative guidance or consensus, and there are no significant transactions that have been recognized in the financial statements in a different period than when the transaction occurred. So we believe we got proper cutoff, accounting policies and procedures remained the same, and there were no new accounting policies issued that were required to be adopted this year. The next section of this letter discusses about accounting estimates. The 4 bullet point items on the page 2, and then discuss the significant estimates that are embedded in these financial statements. First of which, the estimated useful lives of depreciable capital assets are always an estimate. Sometimes assets last longer, sometimes they don't last quite as long, and those are always as estimates when initially capitalized. Estimates of accrued compensated absences are based on current hourly rates and policies regarding payment of sick and vacation banks. Those policies may change over time, so the estimate that's there today may be changed going forward. Management's estimate of the allowance for uncollectible receivable balances is based on past experience and future expectations for collection of various account balances. As always, an allowance is an estimate by nature and by design. And then the assumptions used and the valuations for the MERS pension plan and other plans are always estimates based on assumptions. A lot of language there. The top sentence at the top of page 3 is the most important part of this. We evaluated the key factors and assumptions used to develop these estimates and determining that they are reasonable in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole. So the audit firm concurs with those management's estimates, and we do not have any exceptions to those. Under difficulties encountered in performing the audit, there were none. Under corrected and uncorrected misstatements, the management made any adjusting journal entry that we suggested after their proper review and authorization. There are some adjustments that we'll talk about here in the back of the document that are past adjustments or by nature are not material or required to be put on the books of the financial statements. Under disagreements with management, we are pleased to report that no such disagreements arose during the course of our audit. Management representation, attached to this letter is our management representation letter, which is a letter that basically tells the audit firm that all evidence that we needed and inquired during the performance of our audit, we received, and it was true and accurate to the best of the knowledge of management. Under management consultations with other independent accountants, if there is another accounting firm that's brought in to issue an opinion on an accounting matter, under the accounting standards, we are required to be notified of that so that we can make sure that the fact pattern given to both firms is the same. The actual opinion may be different, but the fact pattern given to both firms needs to be consistent. So to our knowledge, there were no such consultations. Other audit findings or issues, there were no quid pro quo issues that arrived during the audit. All of our discussions were in the normal course of our professional relationship with the county, and there are a couple of other audit issues we'll talk about here in the back of this document. On page A1, just as for historical purposes, accounting standards define findings in 4 captions. There's a material weakness, there's a significant deficiency, there's a control deficiency, and then there's an other matter, and those would be grade A, B, C, and D. Other matters, according to the accounting standards, can be communicated either orally or in a written format, and our firm has a position that all of these will be communicated to the board in a written format. So all the issues we're going to talk about here are other matters. They are not findings as such. They are other matters, merely recommendations to internal control that we have made to management that they should consider in their ongoing daily operations. First item, review and approval of payroll transactions. County currently has procedures in place to ensure that employees are being paid at correct rates and for the actual amounts of hours worked. Since the process of inputting timesheet data into the payroll system requires manual entry, we recommend the county implement an end control over payroll disbursements. This could be done by having an employee independent of the payroll processing review, a preliminary payroll register by employee, or by having the payroll system generate exception reports for data outside certain parameters. In all instances, any independent review and approval should be documented and retained as evidence of the control. I won't read.
Could you expound upon that a little bit?
What happens is, because of the manual nature of inputting the hours, there is inherent risk that somebody could be overpaid, underpaid, and go undetected. So by adding a second layer of review and approval over top of that, that would make sure that payroll is reasonable and makes sense to what employees are being paid. So it's not a control, it's not a deficiency that we've found to the level of a finding, simply an issue that we recommended to management that they would employ.
I have a question, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Okay. With that matter, and with, I think, the basic theme of some of the other matters that you're about to discuss about the independent reviews, back when I was in the banking industry, the bank would do certain things. If a department was, let's just say, staffed to the point where, individuals were doing multiple number of tasks that could be seen as not independent in terms of how they process the work.
Correct.
For financial reasons or whatever, based on the conclusion of the operating board or whatever, that one alternative would be to have the governing board or the agency bring in on an unannounced, random basis someone to come in and to do a quick check in a narrowed scope to make sure that the work was being done correctly and there were no issues or errors or concerns about activity on how things were being processed by one individual that had multiple responsibilities.
Correct.
So I just ask your opinion on the issue of perhaps adding staff or adding additional responsibilities to another worker versus the issue of perhaps looking at the issue of a random audit coming in and selectively reviewing things.
Yep. It's a very good question, and I think what you're defining, Commissioner Inman, is like a pseudo internal audit function, where an audit program is defined by the Board of Commissioners at the beginning of each year, and you're going to test certain attributes of the internal control system. In some cases, that's done specifically by an internal auditor that's hired by the county or by any other entity. In other cases, it can be done by different departmental personnel that have knowledge of that area, that have expertise in this case, payroll processing. By all means, you don't want to have anybody authorize, record, and reconcile transactions together all at one time.
Correct.
You need to have segregation of those responsibilities. Correct. And to the extent that there's manpower available in the county to do that, I would suggest that that's the best internal control available, is having somebody else peek over your shoulders. Does it rise to the level of a need for a formal internal audit department? I would say probably not at this point, if you have enough resources within the county to do that. The internal audit process is awesome. It is fantastic. It relieves the board of a fair amount of responsibility if they're doing their job and getting everything tested and done on an audit rotation basis, but it's expensive. You have to weigh the cost-benefit approach of that to see if you want to go down that road.
Okay.
So, moving through the document, at the top of page A2, stagnant fiduciary liabilities, we noted that the county had some balances that had been stagnant for many years in the agency fund, and we're recommending here that those that can be identified either be located and those liabilities paid to the appropriate persons, or the money is sheeted to the state under state statute. The next two items are similar to the payroll item, talk about independent review and approval of bank reconciliations. We recommend all bank reconciliations be reviewed by an employee or administrator independent of the reconciliation process. and the preparer and reviewer should each sign and date the reconciliation as evidence of this process. Again, furthering the internal controls over those bank reconciliations. And it should be somebody that has a working knowledge of what a bank reconciliation is, so they would be able to identify something that looks strange on a bank rec. Independent review and approval of journal entries at the pavilions. We recommend that such entries, journal entries, be reviewed by an independent employee or administrator. Again, review should be documented, signed, and dated. Next caption, internal controls over reporting of federal awards. As part of our single audit, we noted various reports are submitted to granting agencies without independent review and approval from an employee of the county's accounting department. Although no significant errors were noted in the reports that we reviewed, we recommend that the reports be compared to supporting documentation prior to submission by an individual independent of the preparation. Again, furthering internal controls. Individual, again, should sign and date the report as evidence of the independent review. Further, we noted instances in which grant reports submitted did not agree to the underlying general ledger transaction detail. This was a result of preparing reports based on dates of the related invoices which may not necessarily always agree to the posting date in the accounting records. Again, we noted no instances in which amounts were drawn in advance of current cash needs. We recommend that the county prepare all reports based on general ledger detail. Page A3. Enforcement of terms for loans receivable. Certain loans made through the Economic Development Corporation, terms have not been enforced, specifically relating to interest and penalties on defaulted loans. According to the stated terms, in the events of defaults, interest rates would increase and/or increased payments may apply. Our recommendation is that the county review its control over loans receivable and enforce loan terms prescribed by the signed agreements intact. Property tax chargebacks and tax commission receivables, it's a lengthy report there. Go to the last sentence in that particular paragraph. Considering the nature of these transactions, we believe it'd be more appropriate for the county to account for this activity in its delinquent tax revolving enterprise fund rather than the agency fund. So, compliance with Uniform Budgeting Manual. Through its Uniform Budgeting Manual, the State of Michigan Treasury requires that expenditures be budgeted at a minimum by activity. We noted that while the Board of Commissioners was presented with a line item detail of the proposed budget, the budget was officially adopted in total at the fund level. So if you can modify that to the activity level, that gets you in compliance with the state budget guidelines.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could you explain that in a little more detail?
Yeah. When you adopt a budget, you can adopt it by, well, you see your budget line by line. Activity is a summation of certain groups of accounts. That's what the state would like the budget approved at. Rather than total expenditures for a fund, you break it out by activity within the fund. So you could have 6 different activities grouped together with a multitude of accounts. You approve the budget based on that activity level rather than the actual total expenditure line item. Okay.
Is that something new?
It is prescribed by the state budget. It's in the state budget manual and is required of the counties.
What's GASB's opinion on that?
GASB's opinion is it can go by function, by activity. It does not, it's silent as to by fund. You can go down to line by line item under GASB, but they also recognize function or activity, either one of those two elements. State of Michigan says it's got to be by activity.
Is that, Mr. Chairman, clarification, is that required of all local units of government, or is that just a requirement of the state of Michigan?
It's a state of Michigan budget manual. It's not required, it's not a GASB requirement. It's not anything that you would see in a different state or say another nonprofit or a municipal unit of government that is not governed by the state of Michigan.
So I guess I want to clarify that again. Any accounting functions within the budget of the legislature of the state of Michigan, they would have to do that for. My question is, for local units of government like townships, villages, cities, counties,
Yep.
are they required to do that?
That is correct.
They are?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yep. Moving on to formalized internal technology controls, these are a policy that we would recommend that you adopt. If you look at the second sentence, we recommend that controls be established for the development of new programs and program changes using the following bullet points, and I don't need to read those. It's just more of a chronology of keeping track of program changes that are requested, that are made, and then tested, and then placed into service. Just so you don't, your information system doesn't end up being created and there's no audit trail as to how it was changed. So, continuing under review of user rights and logistical access, we recommend that the county perform an annual review of all user account permissions across all systems. Such reviews should be performed by the departmental supervisors, managers of all the involved users, and should cover new hires, temporary employees, terminated employees, and management access. Calculation of self-insurance liability, we're recommending here that the county use, every couple years or so, they have a projected loss run out on your self-insurance fund. Last time it was done was 06 and 07. And that analysis was used from years 2008 through 2010 for the estimated actuarial self-funded liability. We're recommending that be prepared more often, say every couple years. Just as healthcare costs continue to run out, it's more important to be more current with those types of actuarial, or that's not an actuarial study, but estimate of liability. A5 at the top is putting the board on notice that there's a new accounting pronouncement that will be effective for the county for December 31st, 2011. Direct your attention to the second paragraph, last sentence. That paragraph discusses the redefinition of special revenue funds, and the county, in our opinion, does not appear that it will have any special revenues that will not continue to qualify for that treatment as a special revenue fund. So this standard is pretty specific as to how it changes special revenue funds, but we don't anticipate much, if any, change to Grand Traverse County. The last paragraph discusses kind of the designation and the terminology that will be used for fund balance. The term designated fund balance will no longer be permitted to be used. Funds can either be committed by formal action of the governing board prior to the end of a fiscal year, or assigned by the governing board or its designee at any time prior to the audit issuance. Again, as with any new accounting standards, the implementation guide of this particular pronouncement will be issued, and we will work with all of our governmental clients in adopting this new provision. But fund balance next year might look a little different to you guys when you see it in the financial statements. So,
Unfortunately, I think we're sure that the fund balance will look different.
well, that might be a different element here. Okay, on pages B1 and B2, you find here a summary of adjustments passed under the accounting standards.
Yeah, I did not provide the schedule of proposed and past adjustments to them in this document, so.
Okay, well, I'll summarize this in brief format. Past adjustments are just that. They are adjustments that could have been made to the general ledger, but because of the relative insignificance of them, management and the audit firm met and concurred that they were not material to the financial statements. So management chose not to make those adjustments, and we are comfortable with that, and those are described in pages B1 through B2. They are not significant to the financial statements. However, we are required to report those to the board. Okay? And with that, I would be happy to entertain any questions or any comments with respect to the financial statements, on the opinions, so forth.
You don't do anything with the employee retirement benefits and as part of our audit as to as far as we're underfunded and that kind of stuff? You don't review that?
The only thing that we do with that is there is a schedule of funding progress that's in the document that shows you how much you are underfunded, and it presents the last 3 years of accounting data with respect to the plan, and that is a required supplemental information that is required to go with your document. Most of that information is prepared by the actual plan actuary, and for purposes of our audit, that is defined by us as appropriate use of an audit specialist, and we take their documentation and just place it into your financial statements.
Larry?
Typically, I think if there's any notes of recommendation, I think, Dennis, you can help us. Dean, generally, you address those at a later meeting with the board in terms of your recommendation, and then I think that goes back to the firm that audited us. Is that the process we normally follow?
Want me to go, or you want to take it? Typically, what we'll do is we will review these other matters. As Steve said, there were no significant findings, but we will review them all. We'll meet with the appropriate staff, and for example, the IT staff on those IT recommendations, the treasurer, and then we'll get together and put together responses. And Dean and I talked a little bit. We'll probably sit down, ask the auditor to come in and sit down with us and go over those responses, and then provide them to you.
All right.
So that's kind of the plan, but we always provide you answers to these things and recommendations for areas where we want to make changes or where we think that they may be significant or substantial, and we're going to recommend a change. So we'll be back to you with that so that you can have more input into it.
All right.
We will address all these things.
All right.
Any further questions or comments of Steve? Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Just want to make sure the board knows that this big document has a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in it, and without,
I can imagine.
without Dean and Dennis's help, and Bill's help, this couldn't have gotten done, so hats off to the management here in helping this get pulled together. So it's a good staff you have here, and they're a delight to work with, so.
And the key piece is it's a clean audit.
That's right. That's right. The clean audit always helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Next item is, I see Mr. McGuire has arrived, and we'll put you right up next, Tim.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Updates Hey, Christine.
Thank you very much for inviting me here to address this body.
Would you state your name and
yes.
the organization you're with, please?
My name is Tim McGuire, and I'm the Executive Director of the Michigan Association of Counties.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to bring some good news to you, and that is that on September 18th, 19th, and 20th, over 300 county officials from throughout the state are registered for the MAC conference, which is going to be held at Grand Traverse Resort. So we're very pleased that we're going to be coming up here and give Grand Traverse County an opportunity to showcase this great county to many county officials from throughout the state. It looks like a very good program. State Treasurer Andy Dillon has agreed to be a speaker, as well as Mitch Bean. Mitch Bean is retired now, but Mitch was the House Fiscal Agency Director for many, many years, and I think he'll be able to provide some insight to the commissioners that are attending on what the state's financial situation is, and I think that'll be very, very helpful. Also, John McCullough, the Water Resources Director from Oakland County, is going to come up and speak, as well as Dr. Mark Skidmore with Michigan State University Extension. So we have a good lineup of people that are going to be our guest speakers. We are also delighted that we have over 300 people that have already registered, and I would suspect that within the next couple of weeks we'll probably have well over 350 people. I'd like to thank Dennis Aloya and also Jean Dorenzi and Jen Seaman for welcoming me a couple times that I've stopped over here and had some good dialogue. I talked with Jen and could tell you a little bit about our next upcoming project at MAC, and that is we're investing quite a bit of money and time and effort to put together a virtual university, webcasting and webinars that are going to be available to county commissioners, also to be able to attend the committee meetings live over the internet. And I think there is a lot to be said for that interaction and being with people and involved in the committees, but also we know that Michigan in January, February, and even sometimes in March can be a little iffy as far as the weather is concerned, and I think this project will allow people that want to participate in the committees to be able to participate in those committees over the internet, and it's quite a task that we're undertaking. I shared that information with Jen and told her that we were going to be putting together a focus group to put this together and make sure that we have all the i's dotted and the t's crossed and so forth. She's agreed to be in that focus group, and I appreciate that, kind of the guinea pig to make sure that when we do launch this project, that we have everything in place and that it works properly. So we're going to be putting that focus group together and putting that project together in conjunction with Lawrence Tech University. So we're really pleased with that. Grand Traverse County has a long history of being involved in MAC, and we're very, very appreciative of that. I know, Herb, you've served on our committees, and Christine, you've served on, I think you still are on the Judiciary Committee. Today I went to a press conference given by the Supreme Court, and it was revealed today at that press conference that over the next 6 to 8 years, there are going to be a reduction of 45 judgeships in Michigan. You'll be reading about that in the newspaper probably tomorrow morning. We have the facts went out to you this afternoon via email on what the Supreme Court had proposed. It talks about the judges that are out there. It talks about the 2 open Court of Appeals judgeships that are open presently that are not going to be refilled, and that they're going to eliminate 2 of those Court of Appeals judges. That means a tremendous amount of money. The State Bar of Michigan was there. Michigan Association of Counties was there. Representatives from all the judges groups, the district judges, the probate judges, and the circuit judges were there at the conference, a press conference, and over a period of time there will be a reduction, as I said, a recommended reduction of 45 judgeships. Now that's going to have to take, that's a recommendation from the State Court Administrator's Office, and the legislature will have to act upon that. But presently, the way the economic situation is, I don't know whether, I think it would be prohibitive for the legislature. I'm not speaking for the legislature, I'm just saying from a practical standpoint in the present situation that we are economically in Michigan, it would seem as though those positions would not be filled. So you'll get some more information on that. I'm sure you'll have some more information on our Friday update, and we'll bring you all the information as we have it and that we can speak from.
Tim, I think the recommendation here is to go from 8 in our 3-county area to 7. So we're Antrim, Leelanau, Grand Traverse, and they're recommending that the total go down from 8 to 7.
Interesting.
So, and it's going to be by attrition. It's not an act of the legislature to eliminate the judgeships. It'll be by attrition, and I think all those groups, the district judges, the circuit judges, and the probate judges have bought into this, so I think that'll be a little bit more helpful.
So we don't get to pick?
You don't get to pick. Whoever retires first is not going to be replaced.
Yeah.
That's the way I understand it. So, I also just like to give you what I think is a crystal ball as far as the legislature is concerned when they get back, and that is going to be further looking at court reforms, and personal property tax is going to be a key issue. MAC supports the personal property tax, elimination of the personal property tax, but we want to make sure that there are replacement revenues and that the replacement revenues are protected, meaning that the replacement revenues that go in cannot be touched by the legislature, and they will go back to the local unit of government. So I just wanted to bring you updated on that. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'll gladly answer any questions if I'm able. If not, I'll get back to you, and once again, thank you for having me here.
Jason?
Tim, how you doing?
Good.
Replacements on the personal property tax, do you have any idea where they're going to go on that?
I really don't right now, Commissioner. I don't know.
Because I know that our particular interested party within the county, she's concerned, I think, that will be removed. Personally, I find personal property tax an inefficient way to collect taxes, and I think it's more harmful to businesses and industry in the state, but I'm just curious as to how they're going to...
Well, there are a lot of things out there, Commissioner, that they're talking about. One of the ideas is to have the state take over the court system, and that would be our replacement.
We're all smiling.
Yeah. Boy, if you were sleeping, that woke you up. But there's a lot of different ideas out there as far as that's concerned. I mean, you know, we talked about that several years ago with regard to revenue sharing and the courts and so forth. And I think this is all kind of on the table. I don't think that there's anything off the table, but for me to be able to sink my teeth into something and say, this is what's going to happen, I don't know.
Well, have you had any suggestions from any of the county groups that are a part of MAC? I mean, are there any ideas that are coming out of commissioners anywhere else on how to replace it?
Well, the state taking over the court system is one that has come out. And you know, there probably are a few more, but right off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me, but I'll be glad to get it to you.
Tim, I bet you we'll talk about that at the conference.
Yes, that's going to be, that is going to be the topic of discussion. The conference is really going to be focused in on best practices, because everything that is coming out of the Snyder administration is about best practices. And so our whole conference is going to be focused in on best practices, the sharing of ideas. This part about, you know, today that came with regard to the courts consolidations and so forth is part of best practices. It's part of being more efficient. And I'm sure that that's going to be a topic of discussion. And I think that there are some real challenges out there for purposes of replacement revenue, but we also have to make this a business-friendly state, and I think that's what's on the agenda for the administration.
Is there going to be some information on dashboarding?
Yes. We are in the preparation for that right now. We're doing that. Yeah, that's correct. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, I think one of the things the business community is a little concerned about yet is, you know, the single business tax is going away, and we're going to get corporate income tax, but we haven't quite seen exactly how that's going to read out yet either.
Well,
I'll feel better after December than I do right now about that issue too.
I think that you know, it's been interesting this last 6 or 7 months, 8 months. You know, in the history of me being at MAC, which is kind of a milestone, I've never seen the budget done before June 1st. If you'll recall, those of you who attended the MAC conference, Chuck Moss, who was a former director of Michigan Association of Counties and now the chair of the Appropriations Committee, said he was going to get it done. And I thought to myself, whatever he's smoking, I want some, but they got it done. And it's the first year in you know, the history that I've been around that before June 30th that the budget was passed. And so when we talk about things and we talk about rolling up our sleeves and getting the work done, there's no question in my mind that if you can get the budget done by June 1st, certainly there are other things that are on the table are going to be accomplished. So I do share with you, Commissioner, your apprehension, but it seems as though if the last 6 months or 7 months is any indication of where we're going to go in the next year or so, I think that things are going to be accomplished.
The biggest challenge I see is they keep changing the rules, and businesses have to keep track of it, and all of a sudden they decide that they're not going to expand because they don't know where government's going to go. And it's not so much state government as it is federal government. So maybe we can send some of our state government employees to the federal government. Maybe we can figure out how to take care of this.
Well, I think you're going to have a prime opportunity to listen to both the state treasurer, Andy Dillon, and Mitch Bean, and maybe even raise that question. We certainly are going to provide time at the conference for people to interact with those two people, and I think that's a perfect question to ask and to interject.
Tim, one of the unknowns, or one of the things that we're still confused by is this discussion we had earlier of what are best practices. You know, there's a million definitions of best practices, and I appreciate the fact that we're going to spend time at the conference discussing some examples of best practices. But of course, all that's for naught unless we know what the definition of what meets a best practice by the state. And I guess, have we gotten any kind of direction from them as to how they're going to measure that, or what they're going to determine meets their goal of a best practice?
I haven't seen an outline, Dennis, that says, okay, if you do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, that this is going to be the best practice. I think what the administration and from the get-go, early on, was going to say to the counties, what are your best practices? And can we use those as benchmarks for other local units of government? I think that, that's what they're looking for, is input and obviously intergovernmental cooperation and all those kinds of things. I said from the get-go, when we first had our meetings with Lieutenant Governor Calley and Bill Rustum and Dennis Muchmore, that we wanted to be at the table and able to talk about these changes that are going to be taking place, what incentive programs are out there, and not push ourselves away from the table. And so we've taken a very, very active role in having our board of directors meet with them, so with the administration, so that we can find what those benchmarks are, and we can make sure that we share that information with our membership, and so that a year from now, we're not saying, well, if we would have known that was the best practice, we would have done it. And that's what we don't want to do. And so we're going to keep you informed as best we can as the association in Lansing to make sure you're aware of those.
I'm glad we're at the table, at least during the discussion, so that makes me feel better.
Larry?
Hey, Tim, on that subject, to piggyback from Dennis's comment, probably the number one thing I'm hearing from county commissioners around the state and in northern lower Michigan is this whole issue of benchmarks. And the concern is for counties that have been very progressive in doing interlocal agreements, and they've already got coordination with multiple counties for different functions within county government, and that are doing sharing with other public agencies and those kinds of things, that they've already done a lot of the things that may be expected of other counties that they've already done, and the concern is that how much more can a county do to get rewarded for incentives or any other local unit of government when they have probably set the bar really high already in terms of an example and different things that they're doing. So the issue that we'd probably want to send back to you is there's got to be an understanding, I think, in Lansing that for the local units of governments and counties that have done those things, that they get credit for those things, and that those things should be considered in the incentive formula or thinking down in Lansing, rather than saying, okay, from this line going forward, you got to make so many improvements, and if a county's done all these improvements already, it makes that line harder to move up.
Well, I think that there are open ears there in the governor's office with regard to things that you've already accomplished. I don't think that you've accomplished, at least the sentiment that I've been able to observe is not, well, you got to set the bar higher. If you've done things and you're going to be rewarded for those, it's not going to be, you're penalized because you didn't do more. At least that's not the way I'm getting. But the way it comes across, I think sometimes it's like, well, if we don't do this and don't do this, then we're going to be penalized as far as our payment and revenue sharing. And I don't think that is really the thought process or the idea process of the governor's office. I think they just want to make sure that you all are engaging in those kinds of things to be more efficient.
What's revenue sharing?
What is?
When he's talking about revenue sharing, I'm wondering what he's smoking.
Yeah, right.
Well, I tell you what, your lobbying staff did one heck of a job this year. I know that everybody took their cuts, but we stayed in there and made sure that the legislators knew what the promises were. Everybody got whacked. We weren't but we certainly felt that the lobbying staff did an outstanding job in informing the legislators of what revenue sharing was, what the promises were made, and which direction we need to go in the future.
And we're still, 3 years out?
14 or 15.
14.
2014, I think?
14 or 15.
Yeah,
Yeah.
14.
So we don't know what revenue sharing is up here. I'm sorry.
Hopefully it's in the game plan, 14
Right.
or something.
Yeah. Couple other questions. One is that we have a great big book here for our budgets, And one of the issues that came up within our county in the past has been talking about budgeting for outcomes. And I'm wondering if MAC has looked at bringing in speakers to talk about that and maybe educating commissioners about budgeting for outcomes and what it could do for their counties.
You know, that's a perfect subject for the webinar, the webcasting, and the virtual university.
Okay.
And I will write that down as part of, because we're in the formulation process. But those kinds of things are perfect for us to put that educational piece together so that everybody can participate.
I can get you some contacts with them.
That'd be
too,
great, Dennis.
That you might want to.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
And then the other thing is that I don't remember seeing any kind of information come from MAC on the committee goals. We've got a lot of commissioners that started out, you know, and we've not educated them as to the committees and their goals that they've tried to accomplish through MAC. And I think you ought to share that somehow, get it out to all the county commissioners again and reintroduce those goals so that we can see what they are.
Very good, I will do that.
Any other comments or questions? Sonny?
Tim, just to expand a little bit on what Larry said a few minutes ago, you know, I think it's important that the state continues to recognize the things that we do very well. You know, I'm a little disappointed in the decision that our EDC program, we currently are active in 6 counties, but that's not enough. We have to have 10. So now they're going to take it away from us and have an independent board to distribute this. And hopefully Gene and Tino is going to correct me that I've read this thing wrong, but I don't think I have. But we have been one of the most proactive uses of EDC and brownfield money in this state, and yet all of a sudden the state's coming and saying, well, we can do it better. And I don't believe that. I really, honestly do not believe they're going to do it better.
What I will say to you is if Bill Rustum comes to the MAC conference, which I think he's going to, I want you to come and talk to me, and we'll go talk to him, both of us together.
Cool.
Any other questions or comments for Tim?
Oh, thanks for driving all the way up to Lansing, from Lansing to visit with us.
It was a beautiful drive.
Nice day for a ride.
Tim, I think Larry should take you to dinner after the meeting if we get done before midnight.
Right.
Sanctioning me
Just
for
make
his
sure he
drive.
buys.
Yeah, right.
He's got to get me out here in a reasonable hour, that's all.
All right.
Check to make sure he's got his wallet before you go.
Oh, I left my wallet in the truck. Oh, that happened again.
You've been with Larry before.
I got his number.
All right.
Touche.
All right.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
In a couple
I'll
hours.
be up
Thanks, Tim.
anytime you want me.
Thank you.
Good job.
And be careful if you're out with Larry.
Yes.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Would you read the consent calendar purpose, please?
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such request will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file. 1, child care fund.
Is there anybody in the audience wanting to pull the item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, anybody on the board?
Very excited to
Just one
see
item.
that it's lower than usual.
Herb?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar. Second it.
Been moved and supported to approve the consent calendar. A roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Max Bauer.
Yes.
Thomas.
Yep.
Richardson. Yes. Lemko.
Yes.
Henschel.
Yes.
Inman.
Yes.
Gilman.
Yes.
Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman, please.
Yes. Next item is planning and development, and I see Gene standing up. If you'd identify yourselves, please.
My name is Jean Dorenzi with the Grand Rivers County Planning and Development Department.
And I am Roger Sweats from Clark Hill.
The item before you today is an EDC refinancing, a revenue bond. As outlined in your packet, this was a 2001 revenue bond issued by the Garfield Township EDC Board. The Garfield Township EDC is no longer, and their township supervisor, Chuck Korn, requested that the Grand Traverse County EDC refinance this bond issue on their behalf to save them the administrative work of having to establish an EDC for the sole purpose of just doing this bond issue. This is an EDC revenue bond, which has no impact on our debt limit. It does not require the county's full faith and credit, and it does not require additional administrative responsibilities for staff, being Dean as the Director of Finance or Bill Rokas as the County Treasurer. The request is to ask for a public hearing at your August 31st meeting to ask for public input on the refinancing and authorizing the EDC to refinance the bond issue. Roger can go through the steps on an EDC bond. I'm not sure if that you've had a refinancing before, but he can go through the steps, how this occurs.
Thank you, Jean. As a refinancing of a previous EDC bond by another EDC in the county, this has actually a very shortened legal process. As an EDC bond, it's actually not a bond of the county, and hence there is no liability of the county. And actually, as a refinancing, it does not even under state law require the approval of the county. But for the fact that there are some IRS requirements we need to comply with, this could happen just at the EDC level. In this case, however, the loan that was made to the Children's House was originally set up with instead of a long-term with an interest rate reset throughout it, the parties originally set it up in limited terms, and so we now need to extend the term to accommodate the actual planned length of the financing. And because of that, the public hearing that we need to have in front of the county is what's called a TEFRA hearing. It's simply to meet an IRS requirement for public input, given the fact that the maturity on the bond is going to be lengthened. So there is a requirement for a public hearing to be held, and then after that public hearing, just approval to the process to be given by the county. Other than that, all the process will be handled at the EDC. The EDC has adopted an inducement resolution to start the process. They will, if approval is given after the public hearing, they will go forward to adopt a bond resolution, and then the hope is to be able to have this issue closed prior to the end of September. In the inducement resolution, as well as the approval resolution that will be presented to the county, it's made very clear that this is not in any manner a liability of the county, and that with respect to the EDC, it is only a limited obligation in that the EDC has no general responsibility for this, other than to pass on payments from the Children's House to Traverse City State Bank, which will be making the loan in this case. The security for the loan is all negotiated between the Children's House and the bank, and sole liability for payment on the loan will be with the Children's House to the bank.
Ross?
I would move that we schedule a public hearing at the Board of Commissioners meeting on August 31st, 2011 to consider EDC refinancing of revenue bonds for Montessori Children's House.
Support. Herb?
Yeah, the only question I have is that we just got through going through an audit, and we found some audit exceptions on some of our stuff. Is this going to affect anything in Dean's department? So it doesn't even go through it, and it doesn't come in as part of our financial statements at all? Okay.
Are there, Jason?
This is just, we're a technicality. Okay.
Sonny?
Just, and I know it's just a typo probably, make sure that it says North Long Lake Road, not Long Lake Road.
Okay.
The paperwork just says 5363 Long Lake Road, and there's north, south, east, and west.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a comment that this is just another example of collaboration between the government agencies that are involved, and which is what Larry was pointing out, that the state of Michigan needs to recognize us for doing this.
Okay, it's been moved and supported to schedule the public hearing on August 31st, 2011. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is EDC revolving loan fund.
I'll ask Tino Breitup and Matt McCauley to be part of this as part of the group that has come together to look at the strategies, the strengths, the weaknesses of the state's proposal on the revolving loan fund. As it's in your packet, the EDC, the state of Michigan, over the past several years, has asked that the revolving loan fund be regionalized. And we, in January, the county board said we would regionalize it to 6 counties and make that available. The state of Michigan liked that concept. They used it as a model, and basically 6 months later, 7 months later, they have not only said that they're going to regionalize it, but they want to have it out of the local oversight and into a nonprofit lending institution. So in 2 months, the state has put this in front of their Michigan Strategic Fund, and it appears that this, actually next week, the 24th, the Michigan Strategic Fund may look at asking for a request for proposal to seek a nonprofit lenders and receive those proposals and select a nonprofit lender for our area. The sense of the speed of this area and what the state is doing it, the planning and development staff asked to convene the Council of Governments, Traverse Bay EDC, the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance Authority, and Manistee Alliance. Those are the economic arms in the 10-county region. And I have a map that I think is in your packet that shows where the 10 counties are.
The map didn't come through.
The map did not? On your map, we are Region 2. And basically, it's the 10 counties that the Council of Governments serves. So we wanted to have them at the table because there's 2, not only they're our strong partner, but there's also 2 counties that don't have an economic arm similar to the Traverse Bay EDC or the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance. So we got together on 2 different occasions and we brainstormed, if this is going to happen, which it appears that it will happen, how can we make this work for our region? And the biggest changes is on page 12 of your packet, which indicates that the state would take our fund balance and portfolio and combine it with Benzie counties and have it available to the 10 counties. Second item is that it would no longer have local oversight. It would be a non-profit lending institution or a community development finance institution that would authorize these loans and approve the loans for the 10-county region. And the biggest item is that when the CDFI, that community development financial institution, loans these funds out and repayments are made, they would then be devoid of federal oversight, which makes it much more available to businesses and more user-friendly, basically, because there's no more federal requirements. There's a lot less of administrative oversight, and it would make it the funds more easily available to the businesses. And it also brings we would not have any oversight. Those are the biggest pieces and the biggest change. On the strengths of this, I believe that the strengths, and Tino and Matt, please identify and pitch in where you think we need to have. I think that the biggest oversight is that we'll be devoid of the federal characteristics. There's a lot less administrative oversight, and there's only 2 requirements right now. You have to have job creation. That really hinders some of the businesses if they want a piece of machinery. Sometimes that piece of machinery is not going to have a new job. It's going to create more efficiencies, not necessarily a new job, but be able to bring in new work for that company as well. And the other nice piece is that with the CDFI, it brings more funding opportunities to our area. The CDFI is approved by the Department of Treasury, and the Department of Treasury has different programs that a CDFI has access to. Currently, we don't have one in our area. So that opens up another program for our area businesses as well. And the other area is that there would be more oversight. I know that we have a pretty large portfolio, and we have a lot of oversight and responsibilities to do that. With the CDFI, there'd be a banking oversight, and we would review all of the financials and take it to the board, so there would be more banking component to that review process, and that's what I heard on this board and the EDC as well. The weaknesses that we identified is that there is no local oversight. It was originally federal dollars that came to Grand Traverse County on $600,000. We have done a great job at expending that, and we now have over a $4 million portfolio, and that is a testament to Grand Traverse County and how we got these funds out there. We created a tremendous amount of jobs, and it has worked. And the second area is that the Grand Traverse County businesses would not have preferences. But the group and the conveners all agree that Grand Traverse County, we are the core, and we will probably be the majority of where those funds will go. So basically, we have three choices that I see. We can either oppose this and get the legislatures involved and fight the MEDC as much as we can to keep the RLF in Grand Traverse County. Or we can just let the MEDC do what they want, select their own CDFI for our region, or we can look at the proposal that we have outlined before you. And what we have suggested is that our fund balance in our portfolio go into a 501c3 that the TBEDC has established. And we establish an 8-member board. And that 8-member board would be representative of Grand Traverse County would have a representative, and Benzie County would have a representative. And representatives from the Council of Governments and the economic arms in those 10 county regions, being the TBEDC would have a seat, the Manistee Alliance would have a seat, and Northern Lakes Alliance. It would be an 8-member board. And I think that came into your packet, the diagram.
Yes, page 14.
And MEDC would also be part of that board. That board would contract for a CDFI, and we would have that basically control of the CDFI that we want for our northern Michigan region. Then phase 2, we are anticipating we could do within 3 to 4 years after this initial phase is complete, and we would like to establish our own CDFI that is specifically designated for our 10-county region. The only CDFI that we know of in this area is Northern Initiatives, that is in Marquette, and currently they don't service Grand Traverse County or Leelanau, but we can establish a relationship with them and have them service the loans as is. It's a proposal we think that works for the region. We've already have a 6-county RLF. We can pool and leverage the funds with Benzie County, make it available to the businesses, and have it still housed in Grand Traverse County, basically under the TBEDC, but work with the other area EDCs to make it work for the region. Matt and Tino?
Tino Bright up with the Traverse City Area Chamber of Commerce, Traverse Bay EDC. I think Gene's highlighted this, again, proposal for consideration very well. I would just add to the advantages side of this, when you think about the opportunity to move in a direction to defederalize the funds and devoid them of their federal characteristics. Some of the struggles that we've had and other funds have had to put these monies to use have been with regards to the community development block grant requirements, the strings that kind of come attached with these dollars. And so you have to make 51% of the total jobs you're going to create available to low and moderate income individuals. Now, it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I mean, it's a requirement that you have to make, where companies if you're a high-tech company and you're looking for funding and you need to hire at least 51% of your new employees of low and moderate income status, you're probably not going to go after these funds. On the job creation side, currently, the rule is for every job you commit to creating at your company, you're eligible for up to $35,000. So there's kind of a $35,000 per job requirement. That characteristic would go away over time. When you think about the example, again, that Gene highlighted on a company who wants to buy a piece of machinery and equipment to grow its business, but it's really not looking, it's not probably, it's not going to create any jobs, well, we would look to try and, under the current characteristics and requirements, we'd have to show that as a job retention type of project. The requirements for a company to go through the job retention process that the feds have laid out is that they have to put all of their employees on notice that but for these funds, they run the risk of going out of business, and or they have to put a notice in the public paper. That really detracts people from taking a look at these funds, under that scenario. So, those are the things that over time would go away if we were to pursue this or a similar process.
Matt McCauley with the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments. One other advantage to this proposal by the MEDC that wasn't mentioned by Gene or Tino is keep in mind that these were funds that were granted to the state in the early 80s. There are currently 52 RLFs throughout the state. 42 RLF. However, there's not statewide coverage of the program. So so if you're a business in Missaukee County or in Emmett County, right now in our region, these are dollars that aren't available to you, even though it was intended to be a state program. So through this proposal in the MEDC, that there would truly be statewide coverage. And ultimately, when we're looking to reverse the fortunes, the economic fortune of the state of Michigan, to be able to provide those dollars throughout the state, I think are a goal of this administration and the MEDC.
Ross?
I'll make the motion to authorize EDC staff to work with MEDC to propose a two-phase structure approach to implement a regional revolving loan fund.
Support.
Gene, would you explain the black in the map? Those counties don't have an EDC, or what's the challenge there?
These,
Those are, under this program, Community Development Block Grant Program, those are counties that get all of their Community Development Block Grant monies directly from the federal government. So under a community development, they're entitlement communities, and so they are not, companies in these counties are not eligible for these funds.
They they meet a population threshold that makes them directly eligible for funds as opposed to going through the state.
And then they divvy it up in housing or economic development or however they want.
It's similar to when you saw a couple years ago when these energy grants came through, and there were a number of areas that qualified directly for these energy grants and were designated money, same thing, based on population.
Right. And this is Detroit, and there's no oversight? I'm sorry.
They're just black holes where the money
Yeah,
goes.
that's what I was looking at. It's a black hole.
Yep.
Okay.
Jason and then Ross.
Do the other counties that aren't a part of the 6 counties now, are essentially this is putting together all of the monies that are there as a pool and then hopefully getting more money from the state later on? I mean, is that essentially what this is trying to do? I mean,
that's an opportunity that, I mean, it's one, essentially consolidating Grand Traverse County and Benzie County's revolving loan fund into one fund, and then making those funds available to companies in all of the 10 counties. But there is that carrot there of additionally funding regional funds by the state.
and then as far as the nonprofit entity, would that be like a Chamber of Commerce or?
Well, it could
an agency
be, so
within a
we've
chamber?
we've suggested it could be, the Traverse Bay EDC is a 501c3 Economic Development Corporation. The chamber has its, a chamber foundation, which is a 501c3. It would not go to the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce is a membership organization, 501c6.
Okay.
So it would be separate and distinct, and it would be a specific, there'd be a specific place and a specific account essentially established to
And
track
Gene, you
these funds.
listed three options: oppose the legislation, do nothing, or do it as it's outlined. I would argue there is a fourth option too. We give the money back to the state, and we encourage them to abandon all EDC efforts throughout the state and save that money and give it back to the taxpayers. Now, I know that that's not generally received well in the economic development community, but the thing is, we've got such overhead in all of these particular things, and I understand that's kind of why the consolidation thing is happening. So, in a way, it's a good step. It's just, we still have banks. There are still banks in operation, and banks exist to assess risk and make a profit based on what they're willing to accept as a basis of risk. And I got to tell you, every time I see an economic development plan sanctioned by a government, I get a really bad feeling about it. And I'll tell you, you look at some of the major efforts by the state, we've had a great number of not so successful things. Now, up here, it's been quite a bit more successful in this particular region, or at least in the EDC, has been a lot more successful than in the state. But I just think it's a bad place for government to be involved, personally.
Russ?
There are a number of things that I like about this proposal, and having been on the EDC now for about 2.5 years, the first thing it does is bringing in the CDFI, the Community Development Finance Institution, thank you, because this provides a fiscal review that unfortunately I think we are solely lacking in right now when it comes to, should we make a loan, should we not make a loan, and so forth. A CDFI typically is reviewing loans for things like Department of Agriculture Rural Development loans, Small Business Administration loans. So they already have a staff and structure in place to deal with these things. And of course, in developing a CDFI in this area, then we also, make better access to those kinds of loans in this region. If I can just quickly, because Gene, you brought up two downsides to letting the program go to this regionalization. Okay, the first downside you listed is no local government oversight of federal dollars. Well, in the time, again, that I've been on the EDC, the county board has essentially rejected 2 loans. And that has caused all kinds of controversy in the sense of how dare the county board reject these loans. I mean, it was almost like we were supposed to just say, yeah, whatever you guys want to do, that's great. So again, that takes that responsibility away from us and puts it in, hopefully, to somebody who knows what they're doing. And the second item you have here is Grand Traverse County business will no longer have preference in funding. Again, our problem is we have this pot of money sitting there and we don't have any takers. People are not coming to us and saying, gee, we want to borrow some money. We're not pushing people away from the door. We're not trying to say, well, we don't want to give it to this guy, but we do want to give it to this guy or whatever. The money is there. It really needs to be utilized. TBEDC, under this program, would be basically doing the intake. TBEDC is doing the intake now through Tino and his staff. So in that sense, there's no change. I don't think there have been any loans brought before us that haven't been originated by TBEDC. And just one final example is that CS Sewing. We made a small loan. This board approved it a few months ago to a small sewing retailer, and it was only $70,000. It looked like a great loan. These people were working hard. They had a good idea what to use the money. They're still tied up with the state trying to work out the details. And they had plans to go forward, let's get going, and instead, here we are. When did we approve it? In April?
April, I think.
We approved it in April, and here it is August, and they still don't have access to it. So anything we can do to streamline the process is a great idea. And to speak to Jason's concerns, I sort of agree with them that, maybe we shouldn't be in the loan business, but in my mind, this is the way that takes us out of the loan business.
Sonny?
Well, I guess a couple things. One, I think the defederalization is a great idea, and I think the defederalization will help the problem that we have with the loans that are approved in April and still have not been funded, because it's getting through all of the red tape. I'm extremely confused as to what is a CDFI and how do we create it and how it works. I've read through several of those, and I still can't quite get my head around that part of it, how that works. Now, if we can have the TBEDC do it here, that makes a lot of sense to me. And no matter how we cut it, 5 counties, 6 counties, 10 counties, Grand Traverse County is still going to be the center of this if we're doing it in northwestern Michigan. It's not like a renaissance zone where we can piggyback with Alpena, and make that happen. Grand Traverse County is still going to be the hub of this thing. And I think that's a good thing, because it's going to create jobs here. I do firmly believe that local government has a place at this table and to encourage jobs here, because it's not just the EDC, but the local governments, the people that have to be able to give the tax abatements and do the zoning changes and those kind of things that businesses need to grow and to expand. So I believe there has to be a government component of this. I know Jason doesn't agree, but I firmly believe that if we're going to have businesses grow within our community and move to our community, we have to not only have the money, but we have to have the ability by which to grant them tax abatements and zoning changes and things that are required to make it happen. And that's why we need the government component. Like I say, I'm confused by the CDFI and how that thing's going to work. I just can't get around that.
That's why we ask that for 2 to 3 years for the Phase 2.
Right. The Phase 1, Phase 2 thing makes a lot of sense to me, and I certainly support this. And I just, somehow or another, I'm hoping that during this phase, we actually create a CDFI locally that can control this, so as that we can have input. The idea that local governments, how did they term this? Something about the decision will be made by the state with input from local units. The state doesn't take my input very well. I'm pretty confident of that. And that concerns me.
Commissioner, I was in Marquette when we set up the Northern Lakes Initiative, I think it's called now, which originally we set up through Northern Michigan University as an arm of Northern Michigan University. And I'm sure we could get somebody from that group to come down and talk with us if you want to understand more how that works. But it's been very successful up there, and then they make contacts and ties with other lending institutions and with the bigger areas, Chicago, Detroit, New York City, and it gives them the opportunity to, in many cases, leverage additional funds from other sources, other investment sources. So, it worked well up there for those areas or those times when the banking institutions couldn't come to the table to the level needed, and really it's going to be a lending institution, really, is what we're talking about, but a not-for-profit.
And it's separate of this whole issue that the state's, now attempting to do in terms of taking 42 revolving loan funds down into 9 regions, or 9 essentially regional revolving loan funds. There have been some issues that have come up, I think, with some of the processes that we have had in place as staff in getting things approved by the EDC board, Ways and Means, and the board. And there were several suggestions that we take a look at potentially hiring an independent contractor to make sure that what we're reviewing and what we're recommending is good stuff, and that we know what we're talking about. Well, I think Commissioner Richardson, you hit it on the head. I mean, we aren't bankers. We, do know, finance and those kinds of things, but when it comes to business credit analysis and credit underwriting and those kinds of things, that's where we really lack the expertise. Well, we have, again, separate of this, we issued an RFP, the Traverse Bay EDC issued an RFP about a month ago to go in this direction of contracting with a certified development finance institution. And we received 3 proposals. We've got a clear front runner. It is a certified development finance institution. We are having further due diligence with them next Tuesday, and we hope to have a contract in place with them between the Traverse Bay EDC and this CDFI, hopefully by mid-September. That starts, I think, to solidify things a little bit as we move forward with this opportunity, where we contract with the CDFI initially as part of our Phase 1 thinking, but ultimately we create our own CDFI, which is focused just on this 10-county region, because currently the CDFI that we're considering inking a contract with covers 51 counties, 5 of them in Wisconsin, and 46 of them in Michigan, all of the Upper Peninsula and a good chunk of northern Lower Michigan. And before you know it, it'll be 83 counties in Michigan and 5 in Wisconsin. And so we really want to try and be somewhat selfish by creating our own CDFI for our region, and really based out of Traverse City.
Jason?
Have you identified a list of nonprofit lenders? Just as an example, a sample of a few of those?
So it could be a certified development finance institution or a certified development corporation. And so Northern Initiatives up in Marquette is a CDFI. The Michigan Certified Development Corporation is out of Lansing. They do a lot of the SBA 504 and 7A.
What's the one in Grand Rapids?
Okay.
So those are
Economic Development Foundation is out of Grand Rapids.
So those are lenders. Those lenders don't necessarily have to be from around here. They're going to be elsewhere.
They are based out of, those 3 examples are based out of Marquette, Lansing, in Grand Rapids. The Lansing operation has a senior lender in this region. She's based out of Cadillac. Northern Initiatives has a senior lender who's based out of Boyne City. So we would certainly look to work with them, in the future, with their staff, with their field staff. But ultimately, you want to have somebody in Traverse City.
Now, are their nonprofit activities self-funded? Are they grant-operated? Are they a creation of some form of government?
The CDFI?
Yes.
They're created and they must have a certification from the Department of Treasury. So they're not a government, but they're a nonprofit.
How do they get their money?
How are they funded?
They essentially act as a nonprofit lending institution. So similar to a bank, but they're nonprofit in status. So part of how they're funded is that just as there is right now, that there are loans at an interest rate, they receive the interest back, that contributes to their operations.
And they're non, and I'm just trying to kind of get to a point here, but if their nonprofit status, of course, and as a lending institution, they have a board of directors, and that board of directors is probably a paid board of directors, and
I don't know.
I don't know.
Oh, I don't know if they're.
They have a review, loan review committee. I mean, they have all of those systems and processes set up.
Commissioner, I know in
very
Marquette,
similar to a
when we
bank.
set up Northern Initiatives, that one, now this was 20 years ago, that one was started with federal funds that kind of, got the thing going in the initial stages. I don't remember how much it was, but after that first influx of money from a federal grant, then they were required to, survive on their own. So then they are like a bank.
What I find interesting is, as I said, the local EDC has done well enough. It almost seems that it could survive on its own as an established lender in its own way. I guess.
But it's not devoid of federal characteristics.
Yeah, but in addition to that, it's what Commissioner Richardson said. I think we all would admit we don't have the expertise. as a bank and making loans, and we just don't. They don't, to that level, to be able to monitor those, to look at the business plans and those kinds of things. And, you know, the problem is what we've typically done, I don't know if we're still doing it, Ross, but when I was on the EDC, we really used the bank, who was our partner in the loan, who was putting money in it, to kind of validate the appropriateness of the loan. But that's like working with, you know, someone who's counting on you to help fund part of the...
Don't misunderstand me. I mean, in fact, as I think all of you are well aware, I've suggested that this particular activity would probably be contracted out at some point as well. But I'm just, questions out of curiosity. I don't want to delay the board on this.
Sonny?
I guess, you know, the other piece to me that's important is as we look at EDC, you know, what I believe probably is our biggest weakness is the fact that we cannot identify businesses that need this money. You know, we just really haven't been able to do that well. Otherwise, we wouldn't have $1.5 million in fund balance. You know, but that's one of the problems is, you know, we've been unable to do that. I'm not sure that some CDFI from Marquette or Lansing is going to help us to do that any better. You know, and I still believe that is one of the biggest weaknesses we have when we talk about our EDCs, you know, whether it be the chambers or whether it be the counties or regionally, is there are businesses in this community that could certainly use the money, if not for expansion, for job retention. And we're not identifying those. And the job retention we can't deal with because of the federalization. So that's one thing that's really exciting about this change. But the fact is, if I firmly believe we have to find a way to identify those businesses, because we're losing businesses. We all know we're losing businesses. But the fact is, there's a lot of businesses that are pretty stagnant that would like to be growing, but they just don't have the capital. And in today's world, you can't go to the local bank that you've done business with for 50 years and just walk in there and think they're going to give you money, because it doesn't happen in today's economy. It doesn't work.
If I may, I think another advantage to this, what I would put on the list here is that, and I heard Mr. McGuire mention it earlier, and Dennis and Dean, with reference to the audit, and this term of best practices is often followed around. By going this route, be able to be in the same room with Gene and Tino and Andy from Northern Lakes Economic Alliance and Cindy Fuller from Alliance for Economic Success, other chamber leadership throughout, being able to work on practices to better identify those businesses. Lane Wood was here earlier, being able to combine the work of our business liaisons, be able to combine the work of the SBTDC, and for those economic development-minded organizations to work more closely together to do a better job at that, I think is an underlying strength of this as well.
Yeah, just what happens to our EDC board? What's the timeline? And we do have a vacancy currently. Do we appoint somebody, or do we just leave it vacant?
I'm not sure of the timeline, but I can say that the state is trying to move fairly quickly, and we will be going, after we get the approval from the county, to the state on negotiating this. I would recommend that we keep the EDC board solely for what you did on the previous agenda item on the bond issues. That it would be similar to the Hospital Finance Authority. You'll only call them, and they will only meet when a bond issue comes up.
I mean, there will no longer be, I think, a need for the monthly meetings, and I think by the first of the year, this potentially could change. But as Gene said, if there's a bond refinancing or a bonding that needs to come up under the EDC guidelines, you'd need it for the board for that.
So we should probably fill that vacancy.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any real rush to do it immediately.
That's why I'm wondering.
Because the scope of the program may change, and I think we'd want to advertise that and let people know what the new EDC scope looks like, so that they're clear about what we're going to be doing.
Dick?
I just got my hand here.
He's waiting to vote.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, it's been moved and supported to approve the work with the EMDC on 2 phases. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Option
Motion
4.
passes.
You're going to have to do a roll call.
Sir.
You gotta speak up.
He mumbled it.
Mr. Thomas?
You have to ask him.
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Lemko?
Yes.
Henschel?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Gilman?
No.
Whitlock?
Yes, ma'am.
Max Power?
Yes.
Chairman Fleece?
Yes.
All right.
Stupid quiet microphone today.
Okay, next item on our agenda is representation. Gene, do you want to speak to that?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to appoint the county administrator to Traverse Bay Economic Development Board.
Support.
Been moved and supported to appoint the county administrator to the TBEDC board. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes this time. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Brownfield Plan, the Cherry Republic Center. And I presume Jean's going to lead this?
Yes. Also, today with us is Tom Darga, who is the co-developer of Cherry Republic. The Cherry Republic, this brownfield plan has been put together with the assistance of the Downtown Development Authority, the City of Traverse City Light and Power, and of course the two developers, Tom Darga and Bob Sutherland. The overall project itself is $2,507,706, which equates to $185,000 for environmental activities, $2,322,706 of Michigan Economic Growth Authority activity. Those two are identified on tables A and B of your packet. Table C, attachment C, is the local contribution, which totals $2,328,000. As indicated, this would be the local contribution and would be submitted to the state as part of the Brownfield plan. The Brownfield will be a 4-story mixed-use development with retail and office space on the first 2 floors and residential on the 2nd and 4th floor, and underground parking for the residential components. The private investment is anticipated to be $14 million, increasing the taxable value from $966,000 to over $8.6 million. The retaining of the jobs are 36 for Cherry Republic, and there will be creation of 15 to 20 new jobs. The concurrence of the Brownfield plan occurred at the City Commission meeting on Monday, the 15th, and the Brownfield Authority is asking for your consideration to have a public hearing at your meeting on August 31st.
Larry?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the requested staff recommendation to call for a public hearing on the Cherry Public Center Brownfield Plan at the August 31st, 2011 board meeting with consideration for approval of Brownfield Plan.
Support.
Rob?
Am I reading this right? You're going to spend $14 million to build something that's worth $8.6 million?
In the new economy, that doesn't make any sense.
This is the new math.
Essentially, you have a $14 million net value of the finished product at the sale point, if you will.
Okay, so the taxable value is less than the actual value?
Right.
Should be half.
So take 8.6 and multiply by 2.
Yep, this says that the center will generate $14 million of private investment. So, is that correct?
Well, that's what it'll take to get it basically up, running, built,
Okay.
assembled. What we just went through on another project on the other corner down the way, we're looking at a probably finalized taxable value closer to 18.5, when we actually had 16.4 projected. Taxes went up since the time we started.
116 South Cass, what's presently there?
The combination space is passageways, travel, and an open grassy area.
There's no
And,
grass.
And
And Morsel's is kind of
Morsels,
sitting back in. 156 East Front is the Cherry Hill facility.
OT.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Not, it's been moved and approved.
Dicky.
Everybody understand the motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same.
Thank you.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Gene. Next item on the agenda is finance. Mr. Bott, you're on.
I'm going to be brief based on the time, but we have our general fund trial balance through the end of July. The revenue situation is improving as we are collecting our tax levy, the summer tax. On page 26 is a summary of our revenues by source compared with the prior year. We've explained some of the variances in the written notes below. It was nice to see that the taxes that we've collected through the end of July are ahead of where they were a year ago. The offset or the trade-off, though, is our Board of Review and MTT, Michigan Tax Tribunal adjustments are $57,000 higher than they were a year ago, which, you know, that's, we kind of did budget for some of that, but it's unknown as to what those will be over the balance of the year. Most of the other variances are explained. The one that is of my most concern at this point in time is the charges for services category. We are budgeting at a lower amount, and there are some revenues that we don't have. The jail, for example, is somewhat a function of the population. The population is down. In our surcharge revenues and dispatch this is more of a timing issue. I'm not seeing a problem with the budget for that line item, but that accounts for the reduction in that revenue source. On a more positive note, on the expenditure side of the budget, which is on page 27, you'll see that we're down quite a bit compared to the same 7 months last year. The largest variance on this page is a timing of when we're paying our insurance premium. It's actually, we've paid the premium, but it's a timing difference as to when the general fund has reimbursed our insurance fund. And that's a $650,000 difference in that $720,000 variance. In the public safety function, due to staff vacancies in our sheriff's office is the main reason for that reduction there. We've had some movement. If you recall, a year ago, we were looking at the school not funding the liaison officers. Those were moved from the detective bureau to the patrol budget, so that accounts for the swing there. But we are down in FTEs, and that's the reason for the savings in the personnel area. With that, unless there are questions, that's all I have to say at this point.
Dean, the reduction in the Detective Bureau for the liaison officers does not equate the increase in the road division, but we're still at full staff, correct?
We've had vacancies in road patrol off and on over the course of the year, so that's why those dollar amounts are not directly offset. We've also had vacancies included in that public safety function is the corrections facility, the jail. We've had vacancies there as well.
We have an overtime budget there that's...
We're holding our own there. You'll see a budget adjustment in dispatch, which is also in that category of departments that we need to shore up.
Okay, Dean, next item is budget adjustments.
I need your approval on the budget adjustments. I'll try to answer any questions if you do have any, but I'm asking for your approval on the budget amendments presented.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve. Dickey, I'll second.
Is there a second? Dickey? Okay. Been moved and supported. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
I just had a quick question for Dean. Just in terms of fund balance, because basically we just moved $438,000 from the tax revolving fund into the capital improvement fund.
That is correct. It's moving it from one fund to another fund, and the main reason for doing that is we've received or realizing additional earnings in the tax revolving funds, and we're trying to pre- or advance pay one of the years remaining on the road bonds.
If you look at the budget packet that we just passed out to you tonight, there's a section in there that'll talk about that. And when we had our $700,000 shortfall this year, we talked with the committee that was established about the possibility of utilizing excess tax delinquent monies that Bill had identified to pay the last 2 years of the road bonds that were committed to, 2012 and 2013. So this is taking the first piece of that to transfer it over there to pay for next year's. And in fact, that's part of the budget recommendation, is that we use this to do that.
I did have a question, which was, when you give us the general fund balance at the end of the year, the capital improvement fund is part of that general fund balance? Or is
No,
that, or is that
no.
separate? That's a separate
It's a separate fund. There is an appropriation from our general fund to the capital improvement fund. That's a major, normally, that's the major source of funding for that.
But that's a separate
Correct.
report, okay.
Correct.
And then my question to you, Dennis, is, and obviously we have not looked at this yet, but because of this transfer, then the appropriation from the general fund to the capital improvement fund next year has been reduced?
That's right.
By that amount?
It's a combination of the general fund appropriation has been reduced, but we also, because the last several years, we've cut back on our capital improvements, maintenance of buildings and things. We've increased the amount that's going into those kinds of repairs. So part of it ended up being absorbed in the general fund. Part of it allowed us to do more capital things that we've delayed the last couple of years. So it's a combination.
Thank you.
And in terms of the general fund balance, you'll find in one of the attachments to my letter an update of the general fund balance. If you're interested. Attachment K, Dean tells me.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the addition of number 3, which was revised special budget meetings. Is everybody attuned with that? Larry?
Yes, I just want to report to the board that I met with the administrator, and with regard to the if-needed meeting on September 14th, that was unfortunately ended up being a conflict for the county administrator. So Dennis and I agreed that I would come back to the board and ask if that date could be moved to Thursday, September 22nd, in lieu of September 14th, as if-needed meeting, and that would be the 4th meeting that we would have a budget meeting if we need that. I also, in the memo, indicated that for 2 of the meetings that are scheduled, just a reminder that we would have an hour, if we do spend 3 hours on Wednesday, September 7th, and we'd have an hour between the budget meeting and the public health and safety meeting. And on Thursday, we would be, that would be an evening straight through with no additional meetings. Wednesday, September 21st, again, that would have an hour gap between Ways and Means at 7. And then Thursday, the 22nd, I've just assumed a 3-hour period, just like the previous meetings, and Commissioner Rob Henschel and I, if his schedule does provide, do go out to Five Lake Township to make sure he's well introduced to those folks in that district, given his new county commissioner district. So I've been working with Commissioner Henschel on that. So I did put a reminder in there that the Five Lake Township meeting is at 6 p.m. for this evening. So I ask, I guess a consensus, if it's okay, to have Katie indicate in her process for when we do meet postings that we remove September 14th and add September 22nd for the time allocated on the memo. The second issue is just a quick question. Since on a couple of those meetings we have an hour gap between meetings, whether you would like the Commissioner's fund balance is like $320 or something like that, whether you would want any portion of that spent, because that's our money, like bringing in some pizzas or some sandwiches for those two meetings, or would you prefer not to use that money in the Commissioner's fund balance, and you can bring your own meal in if you wish, or just scoot out for 40 minutes and scoot back. So it's whatever your pleasure is. So we have.
Anybody have any problems with what he's proposing? Good. Rob? Almost.
Well, the dates are fine, I just don't agree with using that fund for feeding our bellies, because that's not what it's for, that's all.
I agree with you, Rob.
Yeah, and that's fine. We could all bring in sandwiches or
Yeah.
do something different. That would be fine. And I'll let Katie know that.
Well, that fund really is for anything that we want.
We want to use it for.
Yeah, you know, cards, flowers,
Yeah.
you know,
We've been
food,
using
whatever.
cards,
Food.
flowers.
You know, we've used it in the past for that, but if you don't want to do that, that's fine too.
Commissioner Fleece, could you make it clear to the public that
Yeah.
this is money that is
That we
personal money from the commissioners and not
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 taxpayer
public money, not a public fund that we have to feed ourselves? This is money that we put into for dealing with flowers and so forth.
And me.
The flower fund that we're talking about is funded by the Board of Commissioners through their individual contributions, and generally it's a payroll deduction. And are you the only one in the administration that's in that, Dennis?
Yep. Yes, it's the board and myself.
Including the Dennis Loya, the administrator. So it's not public money that we'd be spending for flowers or pizza or what have you. It's money that we donate on a payroll deduction basis throughout the year.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Larry, I thought you were going to buy dinner for us that night.
Yeah, it could be part of the chairman's responsibility.
We need to invite Mac back.
Everybody,
I'll support that motion.
is everybody in agreement with that then?
Yeah.
All right, so we got an agreement on the schedule, and we'll just bring in our
I
own
like these dates
Chris?
better.
meals. Okay.
I have a request. At some point during our budget hearings, I would like to discuss the septic treatment facility and whether or not that item should be in our budget.
Okay. All right, good. Good comment. The second item is Dennis and I were talking about making sure we have the proper format that meets the expectations of the board during the budget hearings, budget special meetings. And in the past, what we've done is it's been up to the department heads if they wish to come in and make a presentation to the Board of Commissioners, or it's been a request of any county commissioner to have departments come in and give presentations. Dennis has indicated that there's multiple ways that we could handle that. Again, it could be the lower tiered group or the groups that were not being considered, being proposed to be funded, to be allowed to come in and explain the rationale behind their programs and let them come in as well as a first opportunity. So Dennis and I just wanted to make sure that we have an understanding going into the meetings in September about how they will be handled, and we can send a memo out to everyone. So we just need the direction and pleasure of the board.
I guess the one comment that I would have, one of the things that I think that would be very helpful, at least for mine, I have the summary and the sheets as to how the commissioners ranked all of these, but I don't have the results of the public survey.
It's in your budget.
Okay.
Along with we put the ranking
Because I
of the
think
commissioners
one
in
of the
there,
first
too.
things we need to do is evaluate how we as commissioners rank the services that we're providing and how the public
Well,
does.
let me just offer one note of caution on that. As I told you before, that was much less than a scientific survey. Not that this, but to give you an example of how it might have influenced the outcome, I think it was well-publicized through the Commission on Aging, for example. And of the 350, I think...
And the senior center.
And the senior center, I'm guessing 150 of those came from seniors that were asked to fill one out. So my point is simply, you know, it could have been parks, it could have been courts, it could have been anybody. It's not a scientific sample. So of all the stuff that you did, or, you know, that one I would say use it as a kind of the last thing in your mind when you start thinking about that, not the first thing, because it's not scientific.
But I think the commissioner's survey is very good.
Yeah, and both of those are
That's
in your
very good.
packet as attachments.
Jason?
On those particular responses, though, I will say that I'd hate to discourage any future participation by
Absolutely not.
you know,
Yeah.
minimizing its importance. I will tell you, I would agree with about half, and I'd disagree with about half of the comments that were made, but I'll tell you, a lot of them were quite thoughtful in both directions, and I think that those folks feel like they've got a voice in it at least, so.
Yep, and I think we can expand on that each year. You know, I've been thinking about this a little bit, the discussion that the chairman just had with you, and, you know, originally, now that we've finished this budget, I guess I think it's probably less useful to focus in on just the lower tier programs. We used that in making recommendations, so we used what you gave us in that, but most of those fall under a certain department anyway. So if a department is unhappy with the recommendation, they can say, if we use the other process where we say any department that wants to come in, or any commissioner that wants a department to come in, they'll be able to come in and talk about that program, or if you want to talk about it, you can put it on that list, and you can focus your attention with that department on that program that was eliminated, if that's what you want to do. So I really think, you know, we just want to make sure that we serve you as best we can in terms of meeting your needs when we get into these budget hearings, and that they're productive and they're meeting what you need in order to make your decisions. So that's kind of why we're asking, I think.
Larry, I think, you know, once we review this budget process, or the budget in here, we might have more questions that we might be able to feed back to you. So maybe at one of our next meetings, or the meeting after that, before we have our board meeting, that we take and maybe might make recommendations as to what we're doing. Give us kind of some time to look through this and kind of say, and while we're looking through it, we should be formulating how we want to review it.
Or how about, maybe you could do it, maybe, let's say, within the next week. The problem is if we wait till the board meeting on the 31st, and then we have to start scheduling people for the meeting on the 7th, you know, we may have trouble getting everybody scheduled. So even if you take a week or so, and then you get back and say, I'd also like you to consider this way of doing it, we can certainly accommodate that.
I think the process that we've used in the past worked very well. And, you know, any commissioner could call Dennis or his staff and say, geez, I'd like the dog catcher to come in, you know, animal control. And vice versa, where I think it's important that the Board of Commissioners allow the departments the audience if they want it, so. And that's really worked well. It's like Christine tonight brought up the septic plant, so.
And
you can bring up anything you want, and like Dennis is saying, to avoid scheduling conflicts, the quicker he knows, or his staff knows, they can get to work on doing what we need.
So for the new commissioners particularly, so you understand, we have many goals, most of which is balancing this budget and trying to meet your needs, but the other thing we do is we really work with the departments. And so I would say in 80 to 90% of the cases, when we get done with our recommendation, the department will tell you, we can live with that, we're fine with that. And so we don't really get that many departments that say, we want to meet with the commission. It's more the other way around, which is the way it should be, I think. So one of our goals is to try to come up with a compromise budget that they can live with. And so, you know, you may not see a lot of the departments. That's why it's important for you to let us know if there's certain ones you want to talk to. You know.
Is this also an appropriate time to be starting to look at commissioner compensation?
No,
or do we have to do that next year?
That has to be done next year.
Next
It
year,
can only be
okay.
done before the start of the next term.
Okay.
Okay, everybody understand what we're doing?
Yep.
Good.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is the county treasurer, and he's going to discuss the Garfield Township bond call and the East Bay Township bond call. Bill, you're up.
Bill Rokas, Grand Traverse County Treasurer. No, if they want them.
I think they're in the...
What I'm here, I've been in contact with the townships regarding their bond issues. Some of their bond issues are callable. These are bonds that are obligation of the townships, but the county has the full faith and credit behind these bonds. Garfield had a couple issues that were callable. They chose to call this bond issue, the $3,485,000, with their own funds that they had on hand at the township. They have some other issues that are callable, but they wanted just to do this one at this time and wait until May 1st, when the next time that other bond issue is callable. And so we'll probably be hopefully coming back to you that they decide to do that in May. But they have funds available. There's no county funds here that are requested. They did approve it at their board meeting last week or a couple of weeks ago. It does have to go to the DPW on the 22nd and then come back to you on the 31st.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve.
Support.
There also is a timeline on this thing, that there's only so much time that they have before, because there's a 90-day notice on this.
There's a 30-day notice. We have to notify the the paying agent who handles the bond issues, so they have time to notify all the bondholders that these bonds are being called.
I thought there was a 90-day for some reason. I don't, okay.
It's a 30-day, but they typically like 60 to 90 days to notify the bondholders.
It's been moved and supported to allow Garfield Township to call their bond that they've discussed with the treasurer. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Somebody that bought those bonds. They'll make Garfield Townships.
Yeah, the
Okay, Bill.
Ready?
East Bay Township.
Next one is East Bay Township. They had one bond issue that was callable at this time. And they, similar to what we did last May, they don't have enough funds to call this bond on their own. And so I presented a schedule to them, and this is, I think, similar to, well, it is exactly the same format that was presented to you last May, or April, March, I think it was March. But in this case, they do have some funds. They do have $270,000 of their own funds that they're going to use to, or that we'd like to use to call the bonds that mature from 2018 through 2022. And then the county would supply funds to make the calls, the bond calls for the years 2012 through 2017. So in addition to the resolution to call the bonds, there'd also have to be the agreement between East Bay and Grand Traverse County, basically to loan the funds to East Bay to make this call. And for us doing that, East Bay is willing to pay us interest on the funds that we're loaning them. So in effect, they get a lower interest rate on the bonds that they don't have funds to call, and we get a higher rate of return on our investment dollars instead of me investing in other investments for the county. So it's kind of a win-win for both of us. The previous one seems to work out. They scheduled to make a payment to us on November 1st for what we loaned to them on the prior bond call. And because we do, these are full faith and credit bonds of the county, if they were to default on those bonds, we'd have to pay them. So I think it's kind of a no risk for the county. But hopefully they'll pay us. They should. And at the time of this packet, the resolutions, because this kind of came up kind of short for them, the township is scheduled, they haven't approved it yet, but they're scheduled to approve it on the 22nd of this month, same day as the DPW, and then it would come back to the county board on your board meeting as well. And I do have, it just didn't get them in time for the packet, but I do have resolutions that Chris can mail to you with your packet, or if somebody wants them now. It's basically the same resolution for Garfield on the redemption, and then there's a resolution as far as paying back the dollars to the county. But these will be in the board packet, and if anybody wants it now, I have them here.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to authorize the county treasurer to enter into agreement with East Bay Township to call the sewer extension bonds as outlined in this packet.
Support.
It's been moved and Herb?
Yep. My biggest question here is that with the septic treatment plant coming up, and they're going to have to come up with money for that, is this going to affect them in some way that they wouldn't be able to make that payment that we would be?
These funds cannot be used for the septic treatment plant. These funds are dedicated for these sewer and water bonds. They've been pledged to make the payment, so.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't double dipping here.
Ross?
And how long will it take them to pay us back the 245?
On this one, we're basically providing funds for the bonds that are due 2012 through 2017.
So we'll be paid
We'll be
back
paid,
over that
we'll be
time
paid
period.
back with interest at the end of 2017.
Dennis?
Oh, and I just wanted to check, Bill, this is at a flat interest rate for East Bay Township. Is that correct?
We're charging them a flat interest rate.
And that is?
4%.
4%, okay.
That's a good deal for us.
Are there any other questions? Been moved and supported to allow treasurer to proceed with the East Bay bond call. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion passes.
Thank you. And I'll just have Chris have this stuff in your packet for the board meeting.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is administration, insurance agent of record recommendation for 2012 through 2014. And I see we have Jen at the helm.
Mr. Chairman, can I make
Page 42.
can I make an opening statement, please?
In 1 second.
Okay.
Is there anybody that would like to declare a conflict of interest regarding this matter? Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for acknowledging me. I want to disclose to the Board of Commissioners that I have a seat on the Michigan Association of Counties Service Corporation Board, which is the board that handles the benefits side of the Michigan Association of Counties. It's a separate corporation. And having discussions with Mr. McGuire regarding the relationship between Cadillac Insurance Company and the Michigan Association of Counties Service Corporation, and the fact that they do have a working relationship with them, and they do contribute as a sponsor to events that do benefit the Michigan Association of Counties Service Corporation. There was enough there, based on the discussion, that I had a meeting with Bob Cooney, our civil counsel, and based on the discussion I had with Bob, he felt that it would be best if I not deliberate, discuss, or vote on this matter. And so I'm acknowledging the fact that I will not be participating in the discussion or the vote on this matter. The other issue is, given this is the last agenda item on our agenda, whatever the comfort level of the board is, I can be excused from the meeting, I can stay at the meeting and sit in the audience, or I can remain silent in this chair. But I guess my preference would be not to hear it,
You
not get
remain
involved.
silent in a chair?
Yeah, it could be a first, but...
The only way I can do that is I leave.
Yeah, but I guess my preference would be just to
Go home?
not be involved in the discussion and not hear it.
We're not gonna let you out.
And not
You
here?
Stay here.
And not hear it.
No, you stay here.
I'm willing to stay here, but...
Larry, would you mind
Yeah,
clarifying?
I had a discussion with Commissioner Inman, and I didn't see any reason why he couldn't just sit where he's sitting, but he's not the entering
You get to go
into the
home?
deliberation.
I can see it that way,
He wants to get out of here.
I have a conflict too.
and I'm fine.
Yeah, all those who have a conflict, raise their hand.
Anybody else that has a conflict? Okay, if not, Jen, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Jen Seaman, County Human Resources Director. We're here today to discuss the Employee Benefits Consultant recommendation for Grand Traverse County. The Benefits Committee, which was comprised of myself, Dean, Dennis, and Sally Dreves from Human Resources, are recommending that the county enter into an agreement with Cadillac Insurance as our agent of record. This recommendation is based upon quite a few services that we believe Cadillac can offer to the county, all while keeping our costs low for the county and for our employees. First, customer service. Cadillac has a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week call center. All the calls are formally logged and tracked until resolution. There's also a 2-hour turnaround time that is tracked and required for all claim issues to at least have some contact back with our employees from their customer service representatives. Their municipality experience, as we outlined in the letter, they serve over 100 governmental agencies, including over a third of the counties in the state, a third of the road commissions in the state, and a third of the medical care facilities in the state. Their ability to design creative and unique plans while saving the county money. This is big for us, obviously with our budget concerns, and due to their public employer book of business and their book of business in general, they are able to have a distinct competitive advantage to provide different health care plan options, all within the confines of our labor contract, so we can meet those requirements. They have an on-site claims review process. Cadillac is also a TPA, which we did highlight in the notice as well.
TPA is?
Third-party administrator, which allows them to review claims before they are submitted for payment. There's a lot of staggering statistics out there regarding the claims and hospital bills that are processed each year that are wrong. According to Money Magazine, for example, 90% of about 31 million hospital bills processed each year are wrong. Cadillac, having them as our agent, they would be able to review the medical bills to make sure they're coded correctly. This would be before they are sent for payment, which would save the county and our employees money. So another thing to keep in mind. Labor negotiations. This is a big one considering we have 11 union contracts here at the county. Cadillac is one of 5 agencies in the state that's a member of a group called United Benefit Advisors, UBA. Every year, this UBA has a survey that they gather on their health plan information from counties all over the state, and they compare it regionally and nationally. And these figures include information such on premium share amounts, deductibles, co-pays, what other counties are doing for their health plan, who they have for their carriers, Blue Cross, Priority, that information. Also, what type of plan they have, whether it's a PPO or an HMO or a point of service plan. So great information there, valuable to us throughout contract negotiations for us as well as our union partners. Another thing to keep in mind, Cadillac is the only agency in northern Michigan to be a member of that, the UBA Association. Technology. Cadillac offers an online benefits enrollment system. This would be great. great for us. It would streamline a lot of our enrollment process with our health insurance, dental, vision, life, short-term disability, long-term disability. They have one enrollment form that we could use for all of those, streamline a lot of things there. They also offer a one-page summary that our employees could have so they know their benefits, refrigerator magnets they can keep at home. They have contact information, as well as wallet-sized, credit card-sized cards that contain your benefits information. So when you're at the doctor, you can pull that out, and it will show your deductible. It will show your copay, a quick summary. I think that's very valuable. And they also have a Blue Care Network and Blue Cross Blue Shield representative on site at their location in Cadillac. And this would be very valuable for us. As some of you may have heard, we have had a few transition issues with Blue Care Network this year, and this rep is on site weekly with Cadillac, goes over the claims, anything that's submitted incorrectly, works to resolve those claims directly with Cadillac Insurance on site in Cadillac, and that would be a big advantage to us here at Grand Traverse County. For all of these reasons, and any that I might have missed, I'll let Dean and Dennis add on to that if they wish, but we believe that Cadillac would be the agent of record for Grand Traverse County heading into the future, keeping in mind healthcare reform and all the other changes that are coming our way, and also keep our costs low, not only for the county, but for our employees as well that are also paying part of that premium share. I also do want to take the time to mention both Cadillac and Great Northern Benefits are here in the audience today, and also want to thank Great Northern Benefits for all their dedication and years of service to the county, and also offer Great Northern Benefits, if Terry wants to come up and say anything, he's welcome to do so.
Yes, I was just going to see if Dean or Dennis had anything to add before I called on.
I guess right now all we'd say is that Dean and I are both 100% supportive of the recommendation. And, you know, we may have more to add later, but I think it's fine to go ahead and hear from the agents.
Okay, Terry, if you would please. And please identify yourself and your company.
My name is Terry Root. I'm the proprietor of Great Northern Benefits, 161 East Front Street, downtown Traverse City. And I would like to say a couple of things. Although I respect the administration's recommendation, I don't necessarily agree with how it's been portrayed or summarized. And I'd like to share some facts with the commission about Great Northern Benefits and some of my thoughts. Great Northern Benefits is a local company. We are truly a taxpayer in Grand Traverse County. Our employees are taxpayers in Grand Traverse County. Our competitors are not taxpayers in this county. They have no employees in this county. In fact, some of their employees even live in Detroit that have worked on this bid. You know, I think that's a real important thing in a personal thing like health care. Great Northern Benefits also supports a lot of local nonprofit corporations in this community, including, but not limited to, Munson Medical Center, Hospice of Traverse City, the American Cancer Association, Father Fred, the Northwestern Michigan College, Northflight, and TERRA, which is the Traverse Area Human Resource Organization that Jen's a member of, just to name a few. We've provided a 5-star service to this organization for going on 23 years. I've been involved with the county. I can tell you that my employees are 24/7 employees. Any employee has access to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our phone system is very sophisticated. It notifies us when a message is left there. We pick it up within an hour and we return the calls. We do have 24/7 service for all of our customers. Our employees are very compassionate and they treat every issue confidentially. Our goal as an insurance agency is to provide full resolution with every single insured we serve. Your employees have the luxury of walking right into our office downtown, including your retirees, and they do that. Every single issue that's come up with this transition that we've led you through, we've addressed and we've resolved. And Lord knows, there's been a few of them, as you would have with any other insurance company in a transition. I've been working with Grand Traverse County since 1988. I worked with the health plan of choice back in 1988 for the county, which was North Med HMO. I transitioned you into Blue Cross's PPO. I transitioned you into Blue Cross, into Priority Health, and I transitioned you into Blue Care Network. I've got a proven track record with the county. I believe that I've done a fair job controlling your costs. Last year alone, I was able to save you over $500,000 in health premium just by negotiating a deal with a carrier. The year before that, I saved you over $125,000 just by changing your dental insurance. 2 years before that, I locked up a guarantee with the life and the disability carrier for a 4-year rate guarantee. Unheard of in the industry. Totally unheard of. I can go on and on and on. I thank the county for their support over the last several years. Great Northern Benefits has. One of the things through the process last October, the committee that we met with that was made up of the citizens, one thing I did learn from that committee through that process was that we did need to invest in technology, and we have. I'm here to tell you that we have invested in technology. We're able to provide you with complete online enrollment for health, disability, dental, vision, everything that you have. We now have capabilities to allow your employees to log into a secured portal and see every single benefit they have. That was very clear to me through the process last year when you were looking at different agencies. And I have taken the steps to initiate that, and we are rolling it out to our customers free of charge, every single customer we have. So I think you're going to see a lot of state-of-the-art things come out of Great Northern Benefits. Disappointed in the recommendation. I would ask that the commissioners, for your bylaws, give Great Northern Benefits special local preference or consideration rather than sending your money out of town to an agency outside of Grand Traverse County. With that, I thank you for your time and your support over the years.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Does anyone have any questions of Terry at this time? Thank you, Terry. Are there any representatives from Cadillac Insurance that would like to make any comments?
Just us two. I'm happy to if you guys have any questions. I know it's a late meeting and I know it's a difficult decision. So I'd be happy to address any questions you have, both of what Terry shared or what.
Does anybody have any questions of Cadillac?
I guess I have a question for the administrator more than anything. I mean, what are the immediate stated savings that we're going to have by going with the CIC?
It depends on whether or not a decision is made after this to use Blue Cross or Cadillac, because Blue Cross premiums are for the agent are included
Priority.
in the bid. I'm sorry?
Blue Cross or Priority, you mean, not Blue Cross or Cadillac?
What did I say, Cadillac?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah, okay.
It is late. Blue Cross's premiums are in their bids. Priority's premiums are outside their bids. So the price that they gave us would have to be modified if we went with Blue Cross. But the base bids that we got from them indicated that the 3-year charge for CIC was $225,000 base cost, and this could change with Blue Cross.
Per year? Or
No,
for all 3 years?
for 3 years
Sorry.
is
No.
$225,000. For GNB, it's $243,000. A difference.
18,000.
18. Yeah, it's 18. They are 8% higher.
8%.
Yeah.
Okay.
But understand that we have a policy in the county of lowest and best bid. So, you're not bound always just by the lowest bid. You want to pick the best bid, the one that provides you the greatest service. That's an important component, especially in a situation like this where we're talking about such big dollars that are negotiated in terms of healthcare.
Chairman, may I just, can I address the commission, please?
Yeah, come back up to the table.
I mean, I would just like to clarify what Dennis is saying. The only way that there's a fee that is charged to the county is if you change your insurance carrier. Blue Cross Blue Shield's commissions, I think he meant to say, not premiums.
Sorry.
Commissions are included in everyone's premiums. There's no separate fee that I get from Blue Cross. Priority has a whole different payment scenario. Priority allows groups that have more than 100 employees to take the commission out and then charge a fee back to the employer. And the fee can be whatever the agent wants, okay?
Well, let's be clear, the fee can be whatever the agent wants and the client agrees to.
Correct. It is fully disclosed, fully disclosed. The fees that I have outlined in our RFP are simply a comparison to what we were making under the Blue Cross arrangement. Very, very similar in terms of total received on account. I want to make sure that you perfectly understand that Great Northern Benefits in the past has enjoyed the commissions from the life insurance, the disability insurance, and the dental insurance. Those are all products that we handled, we've sold to the county, and we were paid for those things. We are giving up, under that scenario, all commissions, even if you were to remain with Blue Cross, for all those commissionable products. We're giving that back to the community, which amounts to about $30,000.
Jason?
Yeah, just kind of a follow-up on that. As far as, let's say that, so right now we're with Blue Cross?
Blue Care Network.
Blue Care Network, okay. And one of the other carriers came back to you and said, hey, we want to rework the deal. I mean, you know, is that something that's even...
No, Jason...
I don't know how, I'm not sure how that works.
Commissioner Gilman, we made it very clear to the carriers this year that the RFP process was exactly as the county had outlined it in the RFP to us. We were not accepting any bids past the deadline date. We asked them to put their best foot forward, and Blue Care Network came back to us with a 3.9% increase with the exact same benefits, same funding, no risk for Grand Traverse County, which in my opinion is a pretty darn good deal in a time when the average increase is upwards of 10%. You know, we were looking at some partially self-funding through an HRA arrangement, and I don't want to get into too much of this detail because you'll probably learn about that at a later date, but we were looking at that and to try and save a little bit more money for the county, and would also introduce the county to a partial self-funding without jumping in head first into the risk.
Do we handle HSAs through this?
We don't have HSAs.
We don't have HSAs?
No, we were looking at an HRA, though.
Okay.
We're looking at
Commissioner Gilman.
HRAs.
Okay.
HSA is PPO and HMO, and they're all different things.
And just so we're clear, oh, sorry.
I don't have a question, I'm ready to make a motion.
Can I
just
add one comment, if I may?
Yeah, just a minute. Terry, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I don't know a lot about this. I've had a few discussions with Dennis, and he's talking about the possibility of going with an HRA, whoever our agent is. And you do have some experience with that, correct?
Oh, absolutely. We do have HSAs and HRAs. We don't use a third-party administrator to process claims. We use an integrated type of an HRA, which we believe are much more efficient. There's not another party involved. There's not another layer of administration. They're integrated with the insurance companies that provide the benefits, and it's basically a way of partially self-funding your risk through the deductible.
Okay. And the HRAs that you administer, with the public agencies that have them?
We have, yes.
Are those all with priority, or are they with?
Yes, they are. Yes, sir, they are.
Is there any problem with an HRA being administered, through Blue Care Network?
Well, Blue Care Network, I think it's important to note that Blue Care Network is an organization, an HMO, much like Priority was. It was only as of recent, within the last year or so, that they've come to our market and been a viable competitive option. They have come to the market. They have executed a contract with Grand Traverse County that was a very, very aggressive contract, along with your renewal. HRAs are not a new concept to them. HRAs have been around about 4 years. Okay? So in general, they're sort of a new concept.
Yeah.
But it does give you the ability to partially self-fund some of your risk, kind of get a feel for where you're at. I will tell you that there's nobody that knows your employees better than I do, other than maybe Sally in this organization.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then if the...
Anybody have any other questions of Great Northern Benefits?
This is kind of you or to the administrator as much as anything. Other than your fees, or if the fees were even charged based on staying with or moving from Blue Care, is there an identifiable savings to going to CIC?
Well, the bids that we sent out, there is an $18,000 savings based on that bid, because we haven't determined what insurance we're going with yet. That could be a premium plan, fully funded premium plan that they both bid. They bid almost identical things. It could be a self-funded plan, they came in very high, or it could be one of these HRA plans. So the answer to that is the formal bid that we asked them to make. It's an $18,000 savings over 3 years, total over 3 years with Cadillac. That's only to be used, in my mind, as an indicator, because it's surely going to change when we get in and start negotiating with the agent that we select. In terms of what, it will depend on what insurance plan we pick, how those fees will be incorporated.
Chris?
Well, as I said, I'm ready to make a motion. And Terry, I've got a county administrator, a finance director, and a human resources director who are all recommending Cadillac Insurance. And I've been in meetings when they have not all agreed. But in this particular case, they do. And therefore, I would move that Grand Traverse County enter into a 3-year agreement with Cadillac Insurance Center as the agent of record for Grand Traverse County.
I'll support.
Okay. Rob? Well, wait 1 second.
Yeah, Cadillac.
Cadillac, did you want to say? You'll have to come up here and identify yourself, please, and your organization.
Because I do have some questions.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brian Cote with Cadillac Insurance Center. Thanks for having me up, and I don't want to hold up a good time here, but I guess I did want to bring up a couple points. It's tough to analyze cost. Things have changed a lot in healthcare over the last 10 or 20 years. You've been working with Terry's company. We specialize. This is what we do, and I think reviewing your meeting earlier, you talk about throughout terms like best practices. Where are you at compared to your peers in the state? And I think that's where being a TPA and being a true county HR partner is looking at your funding arrangements. Confidently, there's a lot of money that's going to be saved through our agency. And confidently sitting here, you're probably looking at about $2.5 million back in your budget over the last 5 years that we would have put back, that we would have been able to accomplish working with you. How can I say that? Call Kalkaska, call Benzie, call Manistee, call Wexford County. They're all using a different funding arrangement. What you're doing right now, that confidently through a TPA, we can do it and we can keep your unions whole. And so what can we accomplish together? That's what I see over the next 12 to 18 months. If we don't do it, I expect you to fire us. It's that simple. You haven't made a change in a long time. It's not easy. Change is healthy. And I am continuing to hire people, a small little company in northern Michigan. I've hired 16 people full-time over the last year and a half because this solution works for our counties and it helps the taxpayers. So with that, open to a ton of questions, but Jennifer did a great job. You sounded like a commercial, so thank you, because I'm just getting to know her through this process. But again, sharing what we've done for other counties, you have that opportunity here because of the way you're funding your current arrangement with BCN and paying your premiums.
Ross?
Well, just, and I'll make it brief because I know Rob has some questions, but again, I'd like to ask you the same question. Dennis seems to think that the HRA approach may be the best way to, save us money going forward, and I was wondering, how many of these you deal with, with public agencies, and whether you deal with a number of different companies that provide the insurance through this program.
Sure, just about every company in the state except for HAP. We don't have a huge presence in Southeast. But I just personally, I'm from there originally. I don't want to work down there as much. There's enough agents down in that area. So much experience that when earlier Tim McGuire talked about the former Speaker Dillon being at your MAC conference in September, where he's looking at us to again, probably lead a breakout session on healthcare. We testified in Congress because of the data, credible data that we have. And if you remember at the time, Speaker Dillon wanted to put all you guys on one health plan specifically to address the issue with schools. But politically, it's easier to lump you on top of with schools to try to address the challenge. And we used our data as credible information so that in the end, they didn't go down that path of putting you on one health plan. So today, I can tell you with this funding arrangement of the 100 public entities that we do, I know the reimbursement, I know to the penny, and I track it all. In addition, being a TPA, we liken that to using Raymond, who I'm familiar with the president of Raymond too. We've worked together consulting with different counties under different arrangements. But with that data, using a TPA, there are a lot of claims that get processed incorrectly. The challenge is you have an old first dollar health plan. It's the Cadillac. It doesn't exist anymore. The challenge is if Jennifer's stats are true, and I can tell you because of our call center, we track it all, it's probably close to 89% and 90% of hospital bills are processed incorrectly. If you're having the insurance carrier audit that, who's auditing the carrier? And through our system, we reprocess it. And part of that testimony that we did for Speaker Dillon at the time in Congress was over the last 3 years, we've successfully reprocessed $1.8 million in misbilled medical claims for our counties. The carrier said, you owe the money, you're paying the premium. Who's helping maintain the integrity of the benefit? That's our job. And again, difficult decision, but if we don't accomplish things together for you, not in 3 years, but in a year, year and a half, you need to get rid of us.
The question. The question was, how many of your entities that you manage for government entities have HRAs?
Boy.
Approximately.
Yeah, I would say percentage-wise, probably 90%. And you got to understand the dynamics too. If we reduce your premium under the traditional sense where you're paid commission based on premium, we reduce our compensation. And in your case, you've got probably a 30% reduction in what you can spend by implementing an HRA. So about between 80 and 90%.
Rob?
Thank you. Dennis, back earlier this year, we were talking about agent of record, and I believe it was Commissioner Lemkool suggested we go into a 3-year with our current agent at the time, and you were against that. You said 1 year. Now you're saying 3 year. What's the difference?
The difference is we've been with this current agent of record for 23 years. We wanted to go out and formally bid all of the insurances. And we went through a process last fall whereby we determined that we went through and we interviewed 5 different...
Well, there are 8 responses, sorry.
8 responses. How many did we interview?
3.
We interviewed 3 with a citizens group. And the citizens group identified 2 that they thought were the best, the 2 that we are talking to now. The timing of that came at such a point that there was not time to get a new agent and then go rebid insurances before the first of this year. That's why we recommended a 1 year. And this is consistent, I think, with county commission direction to us over the past 8 years or so. The county commission has been very adamant, whether it's been with architects, whether it's been with auditors, accounting firms, The county board has said we need to change them regularly. Some of you will remember that. And we need to, get a different perspective on things. I can remember that discussion of commissioners telling us that with our auditors, for example. So we believe that every contract we do should be, I shouldn't say every, in almost every case where we're hiring professionals, we should have a 3-year contract with the potential for a 3-year renewal. That's our basis. But because of this situation where we were evaluating agents, that's why we did a 1-year agreement.
Jason?
Herb was first.
Two questions. One is that if you change our employees over to an HRA or HSA, what kind of training program do you provide for employees? Because we can't just drop this into them and say, okay, deal with it, because this is a whole new program, a whole new way of providing insurance. Do you have a training program? Do you bring it into us, and how do we handle that?
Great question. Actually, when I got started initially in school or college, I wanted to be a teacher, and that's probably one of my favorite parts of it. We have a whole library that we've created. It's all organic creation. I started this business, and unfortunately, there's not many books on how to in the HRA world. It was actually 2003 when the IRS allowed mid-sized businesses and small businesses like you to enter into this partially self-funded HRA arrangement. And from then, we had to just create, and now today we probably have close to 1,000 PowerPoints, and I saw a bunch on the screen on someone's screensaver of this library that's used. And it doesn't matter how many shifts you have and what else is necessary. Ironically, we have a lot of your union leaders come to us, and we speak at their conferences because they recognize this issue isn't going away. Senate Bill 7 or the House version is going to pass, and you're going to have many more stakeholders that are going to be deciding on what's the direction of the county and why are we paying so much and why are they paying less at the surrounding counties. So without the education, it falls apart, and I can tell you confidently and proudly, we've never had a group cancel once they've entered into this arrangement, and we've never had to go through arbitration. We do keep your union contracts whole, and at the same time, probably provide a layer of service that they never received before. No disrespect to Terry, but again, 40 licensed professionals only in healthcare, that's our job. So we do multiple meetings and tons of ways for follow-up to help reinforce the message.
The other question I have is, will you move your office up to Traverse City?
That's a good question. We, today.
Or have an office here, not just maybe corporate office,
Right.
but have an office here.
Yeah, we've looked at that, and actually, I'd have to look to see who works at our office out of Traverse City. I know we've had people drive down from Traverse City in the past that have come from Hagerty Insurance, but again, we're in a very fast hiring pace to help offset our growth for the commitments we make for service. So I think definitely it's a young organization. I'm a young owner, and there's opportunities out there.
If we didn't ask, we don't get.
I get it. I do.
Jason?
You've pretty much insinuated that in the last 5 years, you could have saved us a couple $1 million. Now, assuming that you're pretty confident of that, could you in fact, you say, well, you just fire us. Well, a 3-year contract is a 3-year contract. Would it be something where you could pledge a certain amount that you could save the county?
Yeah, definitely. We track, the beauty is we've got peers just like you. We track every group and we analyze it every year. It's about $2,500 per employee per year is what we save that enter into this funding arrangement.
When I say pledge, can you back it up with something? Can you guarantee?
Like the compensation that I'm making?
Guarantee in some way to the county that you're going to save us that much?
I've got to be careful. They're state regulators. Unfortunately, they do a poor job in our industry regulating what you can and can't do. I'd be willing to enter into something like that, but I would like to have OFER's approval first. I wouldn't want to do anything that stepped over the line. But I do. I've called on your county for many, many years. And now that they allowed us to get a release letter and look behind the veil with the carriers, there's a nice opportunity.
If I understand what's involved in that process, but at a minimum, if we signed a contract, would you be willing to have that 3-year contract have an opportunity to be reviewed annually and terminated by us if we're not servicing you?
Absolutely.
You're not servicing us, excuse me.
Absolutely. Again, it's a two-way street. We have the first counties that ever signed up with us, still with us today. We're not perfect. We do lose business, but we've got a pretty darn good track record. You tell us what metrics you want to put in place. And if we don't do it, I'd love for it to go back to Terry. But I do feel that there's a nice opportunity for your county to benefit, which will help your budget.
This has to come before the board at the end of the month.
Right.
That's correct.
Anyway, would it be possible for you to establish some criteria where that could be reviewed, or where we could, fairly approach that if this were to pass tonight?
What?
I mean, to set up what triggers a review in a year if certain benchmarks aren't met?
We could talk with them. I don't know what we can negotiate, but we can certainly talk about it.
You just
But,
put
I mean, my concern is...
Commissioner, myself personally, I would just as soon have the contract say that we have the ability to terminate for whatever reason we want to terminate. That way we don't have any floors. If we are not happy, we just say, we're terminating and we're going back out. I'd rather not put parameters on it that bind us. I'd rather have no binding.
Can we have that motion amended to include that? I mean,
that
the 3-year...
could be reviewed annually?
You're just looking for a cancellation clause, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Brian said that from the beginning. He said fire him if he's not doing the job. So I would anticipate we'd put that in any contract anyway.
30-day out. Absolutely.
30-day out. There you go.
All right, I'll amend my motion.
No, I'm good with that.
Okay. Are we all set then? Sonny?
I'm sure you understand this is a difficult situation. We've done business with Great Northern for 20 years. I've done business with them for 15 years on my side of the business, on another one. So it's difficult to make these changes. That being said, I also understand the difference when you have companies that do large quantities of governmental agencies, because they are a strange anomaly all on their own. They just have a lot of separate requirements, and we all know that we have way too many bargaining units that we have to deal with, and 13 separate contracts and all of that stuff with different benefit packages. Hopefully we're getting closer to a master contract, but we're not there yet. So understand this is a very difficult decision for us, and the fact that, they're a long-standing local company and we're looking at something away from here, it's difficult.
Dennis?
Finally, I guess I want to be really clear on this. We've had an excellent relationship with Great Northern Benefits. They have serviced our needs expertly and done a really good job for us. My view on this is simply this. It's been 23 years with the same agency, and while they've done everything they can to stay up to speed, and I think they've done a great job of that, sometimes, especially now when we get these, mandates down from the state, you're going to, 20% co-pays, and you're going to do this, and, I just gave you a budget that is within tens of thousands of dollars of what you spent in 2007. That's how much we cut this budget. We're getting squeezed in so many directions that I just think a fresh look is important. Anybody who would come to me and say, Great Northern Benefits, how are they as an insurance agent? What kind of job? I would give them an excellent recommendation. It's just we're getting to the sides now where I think a different perspective, a different look is probably important for us because it's a critical time.
I'd like to say a few words about it. Great Northern Benefits has done a good job for the county. I know the principals in that business. I too own a business, and I have a renewal coming up shortly. And my door is literally being beaten down by people wanting to give me quotes. And you have to look at the service that's provided with the coverage. After 23 years, and when Dennis spoke earlier about the board had been telling him the last 6 or 7 years or 8 years, we need to get this bid out. I was one of those people, because I truly believe in that. And based on staff's recommendation, I'm going to vote for this change, and if Cadillac doesn't perform up to our expectations, he's gone. It's cut and dried, pure and simple. And like he said, he would give it back to Terry, and we know we have a proven person there, his business. They've supplied our county for 23 years, so I'll be voting for the motion. Herb?
Yeah, you know, I've been a huge advocate for changing out, and particularly for our audit firms that, you know, the recommendation that we change people every 5 years or every 6 years to build it, because they have a different point of view, everybody does. But I also have to agree that Terry's been doing a lot of work for investing into technology, and when you start putting that kind of investment, and then you take and pull the rug out from underneath of him, how does he continue to provide that? And if Cadillac doesn't perform, how does he go back and pick it up right away and be able to do it? He doesn't. It's not possible to be able to grab onto that thing and be able to do it. So, you know, just to let you know that if you decide that we're going to go for a 3-year contract, you're going to be there for 3 years. There's no two ways around it. You know, even if you put a 30-day clause on it, trying to change people in the middle of the stream when you're going out and negotiating with healthcare companies, you're not going to change. There's just no way you can do that.
Well, we made a big change last year. We voted that insurance out. Terry's the one that did the negotiations. We saved over $500,000. That's a real hunk of change, and that's money we saved the taxpayers of this county. We're able to even save them more by moving to the Cadillac agency. We need to do that, particularly with the lack of funds that we see coming in. And Dean spoke about that this evening, so. Okay, I'm going to call for a vote on the motion, and I'd like a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Lemkool?
Yes.
Henschel?
No.
Inman? Oh, excuse me. Gilman?
No.
Wheelock?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Thomas?
Reluctantly, yes.
And Chairman Fleece?
Yes.
6-2 vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes.
So this will go to the board at the end of the month.
Thank you.
On the 31st.
Thank you for your time and letting me sit through the meeting tonight.
Yeah, thanks for coming down from Mackinac Island, leaving your family tonight.
It's family vacation, but that's okay. That's why I got this fancy jacket on. I apologize.
Commissioners, I just want to mention, that we're done with this, I just want to mention, I passed out to you an update on the Health Service Center kind of evaluation that's going on, along with a timetable for you. So I just make sure you take a look at that when you get a chance. And we'll be talking more about that later. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next item on the agenda is unfinished business, and I don't believe we have any. Next item would be new business. I don't believe we have any of that. We come to the second public comment. Jen, would you like to say anything? We're looking for public. How about the other two in the audience? No? So we'll pass on that. Then next item is Commissioner Committee reports. Does anybody have anything they wish to say?
I just want to let everybody know that last night at Parks and Rec, Russ Clark, after 10 years of service, has resigned from the Parks and Rec Commission. He has taken a job with the National Park Service in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Wow.
And he's extremely excited. He's going to be working on trails in the National Park Service, and I know everyone wishes him well in this new exciting chapter in his career.
Anybody else? I'd just like to announce that the Buckley Old Engine Show starts tomorrow. And if you've never been there, particularly for the viewing audience and the commissioners, if you've never been there, you're cheating yourself. Go there, enjoy yesteryear, and if it isn't there, science hasn't invented it yet. But that's where I'll be the next 4 days through Sunday, and Sunday we'll bring our equipment back home. But it's really an enjoyable time for the entire family. They have a small fee at the gate. Once you're inside, everything's free.
Reasonable.
Like this year, they've just finished a 1918 steam locomotive to replace the steam locomotive they've been using. The train ride's free, and it's a lot of fun. Anybody else? Okay. Notices and announcements. August 19th is the Wellness Barbecue, 11 to 1:30. August 23rd is the Road Commission meeting at 9 o'clock, rescheduled from Wednesday to 24th. I just noticed that Commissioner Inman sneaked back into his chair. August 24th, 1 to 3 p.m. is the joint meeting with the Tribal Council at the Peshabe government offices. And then the budget hearings start on September 7th at 3 p.m., September 8th at 6 p.m. The 14th has been rescheduled to 22nd. And then September 21st at 3 p.m. And like mentioned earlier by Tim McGuire, the MAC conference, September 18th to the 20th at Grand Traverse Resort. I think there's 5 commissioners registered.
So far, I think.
Yeah, 5 or 6. Yeah.
Commissioners, you really ought to go to that. The interaction amongst the other commissioners from all over the state, you heard the man say there are going to be about 350. They're all commissioners, and they got some good ideas. Perhaps some of them would rub off on us. And I would like to see the whole commission there, because it's in our town, our county, and I think we need to have a good representation. But seriously, this would be the 3rd one I've been to, and every time I go, I learn something new.
And also on the 18th is the Constitution celebration at the Opera House too, so I'm going to have some split time there between the MAC conference and that.
All right. Anybody else have anything? We don't have a closed session tonight, I believe, do we, Dennis?
No.
I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Aye.
Unanimous.